Okay. I call to order this regular meeting of the governing board for the Scottsdale Unified School District. It is Tuesday, September 15, 2020, and the time is 5:03 p.m. I will have a roll call starting on my right.
Jan Michael Greenberg.
Sandy Kravitz.
Barbara Perleberg.
Patty Beckman. And Allison Beckham. All 5 governing board members are present, and we have a quorum. All rise, and Vice President Beckman, will you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Due to COVID-19 emergency, Center for Disease Control guidelines and pursuant to guidance from the Arizona Attorney General, members of the public will not be permitted to attend in person today, but will be able to view the public portions of this meeting online at the usual live stream site on YouTube. Moving on to the approval of the agenda, do I have any changes to the agenda? No changes to the agenda, then I will move to approve the agenda as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Greenberg seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. If you would like to make a public comment today, please call 480-484-7873, and it should be on your screen. Public comment will be heard on consent agenda, non-agenda items, and heard after the superintendent's comments. We do have some new guidelines for public comment tonight. We're trying something new out. The public comments will be supported via a dial-in call center. Your call will be answered by one of our agents who will collect your name and telephone number. Your call will then be put into a holding queue to be patched through to the live meeting in sequential order. We opened the call queue at 5 p.m., and the opportunity to call in for public comment will end at the conclusion of the superintendent's comments. There will be some limitations, and if the numbers of those wishing to comment, whether on consent, non-agenda matters, or any agenda items, are too numerous to hear within a reasonable time, the board may consider limiting the public comment. If your call is disconnected for any reason, you will need to dial back in prior to the end of the superintendent's comments. So we will move on to student and staff recognitions and celebrations. Dr. Menzel, would you please present?
Good afternoon. Thank you, President Beckham, Vice President Beckman, and governing board members. As you well know, Scottsdale Unified is home to incredibly intelligent and dedicated students and educators, and it is my privilege today to bring just a few of them to your attention in our monthly celebrations. First off, we want to congratulate the 14 SUSD seniors who have been selected as semifinalists in the 2021 National Merit Scholarship Program. Out of a pool of more than 1.5 million students, these academically talented members of our class of 2021 are among 16,000 students nationwide who are now eligible for National Merit Scholarship worth more than $30 million that will be awarded next spring. They became eligible by virtue of their scores on the PSAT, or Preliminary Scholastic Aptitude Test, that they took last year when they were juniors. SUSD Merit Scholarship Program semifinalists are, by building, Arcadia High School, we have 3 students, Calvin Eng, Maximilian Lunefeld, and Mary McManus. From Chaparral High School, Morgan Brophy, Montgomery Gibson, Alexandra Meng, Siddhant Saxena, and Brandon Yang. From Desert Mountain High School, we have Sanya Agarwal, Junho Aw, William Lace, Daniel Marchant, and Danielle Sherman. And from Saguaro High School, we have Samuel Eckert. These students' work is not over, however. To continue in the competition, they must submit a detailed scholarship application that provides information about their academic record, participation in school and community activities, demonstrated leadership abilities, employment, and honors and awards they have received. And we look forward to sharing the names of SUSD's finalists with you in February. So if they were here, we would give them a round of applause. We are proud of our students who have made it this far in the process.
We can still give them a round of applause.
2 more celebrations. The next one is you've become familiar the past 2 years through the district's textbook adoption process with members of our teaching and learning team directed by Cheryl Redner. One you may not have met is our pre-K to grade 12 social studies academic coach, Stephen Williamson. Not only does Mr. Williamson oversee our social studies curriculum and assist classroom teachers with its implementation, he helps our educators improve their knowledge of economics and financial literacy through connecting them with professional development opportunities and free teacher and student resources. For that work, Mr. Williamson has received the District Specialist Recognition Award from the Arizona Council on Economic Education. We want to congratulate Mr. Williamson and thank him for what he does every day to help our SUSD students become economically and financially responsible citizens. And finally, if you've been a part of SUSD for a while, which all of you have, and particularly if you've been a part of the Arcadia learning community, and I know Mr. Board Member Greenberg, you are deeply connected with that community, you're probably familiar with an outstanding teacher by the name of Richard Maxwell.
Yeah.
So Mr. Maxwell created the district's Arcadia High School's Creative Musical Arts and Science program known as CMAS. Not only are the series of 3 CMAS classes a fine arts curriculum offering, they're also part of our of the Communications Media Technologies classes in our Career Technology Education, or CTE program, along with film, TV, graphic design, and technical theater. Students in Mr. Maxwell's classes not only learn about musicianship, music theory, and composition, they also learn the fundamentals of the recording studio and produce and participate in live performances for the school and the community. I'm happy to report tonight that Mr. Maxwell has once again been named a quarterfinalist for a 2021 Recording Academy and Grammy Museum Music Educator Award. But it is his most recent work with the National Pilot Program headed up by the University of Maryland and coordinated locally by Arizona State University called Engineering for Us All, or E4USA, that I want to bring to your attention today. E4USA is a first-of-its-kind national initiative that is designed to introduce engineering design principles to a new generation of American students. If you think about it, music with its compositional patterns is closely associated with mathematics and thus engineering. So you can see how Mr. Maxwell is a perfect participant in this pilot program that aims to demystify engineering and help students make connections between something they may take for granted, like music, and the world of science. Next month, Mr. Maxwell will represent Arcadia, SUSD, and the state of Arizona when he addresses that connection and contributes research to the Frontiers in Education virtual online conference of the American Society for Engineering Education and the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Maxwell and thank him for being a part of this groundbreaking national initiative on behalf of the CMAS program and Arcadia High School. This is something that will ultimately benefit students nationwide, and we're very proud.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. And now we will go on to superintendent's.
Thank you, President Beckham, and members of the governing board. There are a number of things that I would like to highlight this evening. As you know, every week we have new and interesting challenges and opportunities here at Scottsdale. Earlier this week, I read a quote from Dr. Fauci that said, "We've really got to realize that from day one, you don't know it all. And you've got to be flexible enough to change your recommendations, your guidelines, your policies, depending on the information." And I thought that was timely given where we are at the present moment. So first, I'd like to just give a brief update. As you know, this week, special education students and special programs and our preschool students have returned to learn. And while it's only the second day, we've received some preliminary reports that are encouraging, and we also have identified some opportunities for improvement. In the transportation area, for example, we were scheduled to transport 135 special needs students. 102 to 105 of those will be in our programs. The rest are in private placement. We have some special education students where transportation requests weren't submitted by the September 4th deadline, and so that transportation didn't happen this week, and Brendan Wagner and his team are working on getting those scheduled as we speak. From the early learning perspective, Debbie Ybarra indicated that preschool went off without incident. Teachers welcomed the students and parents at the gate, and each student began the days with books being read to them, art activities, All About Me, which is a CKLA curriculum, and learning rules and regulations. Students were excited to interact with other students, and it was a successful 2 days. After visiting sites yesterday, we started off day 2 with 4 site visits by DHS at Cherokee, Cochise, Desert Canyon Elementary, and Navajo, and Debbie reports that we passed all 4 of those site visits. 4 additional sites are being inspected next week, and we'll share that outcome as well. In terms of numbers, we have 317 community ed preschool and pre-K participants enrolled, and 193 attended on Monday and Tuesday. We have 140 enrolled in our Title pre-K program, and 104 attended on Monday and Tuesday. All teachers reported and their full-time paras. Part-time paras are still helping at the EDL camps. So early learning will return full-time next week, along with our planned rollout of K2 in person. On the special education front, again, we're learning about how things are going. One of the things that I've heard from a number of places that students are doing a fantastic job at complying with mask wearing requirements. So that was one of the concerns that people had as we returned to our campuses, and that has not seemed to have been a problem. And I did receive an email from a parent with a son at one of our high schools who acknowledged not only did his son wear his mask all day long, but he came back and exclaimed just how glad he was to be back in school. So some positive preliminary reports, and we'll continue to work on troubleshooting areas that surface as problems and concerns. The second thing that I want to talk about, which I think is on everyone's mind at the present time, is, we initially surveyed our community about what their preferences were, their risk tolerance related to returning to learn in person versus remaining in enhanced distance learning until the metrics were in green. Based on that information, we adopted an approach that would allow us to move forward with what we called a natural hybrid, and we sent out commitment forms to our K-5 families. Middle school and high school families were not sent commitment forms because we're still finalizing what the return will look like in person at those levels. Scheduling makes it more complicated, and so that's still a work in progress. Much to my surprise, the data that came in from our community with respect to choosing full return versus remaining in enhanced distance learning was not consistent with the survey results that we had in terms of the number of parents who said they wanted to remain in enhanced distance learning. And so depending on the building, the numbers have ranged, and I need to be clear, the numbers are of those that are in EDL. So Scottsdale Online is not included in this number. But we have it anywhere from 60 to 90% of the EDL families that responded expressed a preference to return in person. Now, in order to understand what the impact of that is, you actually have to look at the demographics and the caseload in each of the buildings, and we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that in a later presentation. In some cases, the class sizes still work out pretty well in terms of being smaller student-teacher ratio. In some, those numbers are higher than we would have anticipated. In no case do we have a class size at the elementary level that's greater than 30. I think 28 might have been the highest. We have a number that are in the mid-20s and some that are upper 20s. When Dennis Rayler does the presentation about how we can set up our classrooms, you'll hear that in most cases we're able to meet the 3-foot distancing within this construct, but we do have to attend to some of the issues in terms of the higher numbers. One of the things that we had suggested in response to a question at our last meeting was that if the numbers come in higher, which was a possibility we at least suspected in a couple of buildings, that we would be sending out notification to parents so that they would have an opportunity if they wanted to reconsider and choose enhanced distance learning. So that's something that we're working on. I think there are a couple of things that are important to point out based on some emails that I've received, I suspect you've received. One is questioning whether or not we're in compliance with the definition of hybrid. And I have reread both the Arizona Department of Health Services and the Center for Disease Control's definition of hybrid, and they both specify that hybrid is some students online and some students in person. The CDC guidelines in particular give 5 levels of risk. There's minimal to no risk associated with all online. There's minimal risk associated with hybrids that include reduced class sizes and a number of other variables. There's moderate risk when you have a hybrid but larger class sizes. And then we're not, none of the proposals we have in front of the board included anything that would put us in the high or highest risk, because we're not moving to a full return and not implementing any of the other mitigating strategies. So where we're at the present time is in compliance with the hybrid criteria that was authorized based on the metrics that have been adopted while we're operating in yellow. As you know, we have to continue to monitor that data on a regular basis because it's possible that you can go in reverse. We prefer not to, but it's possible that cases could increase and we could find ourselves in a place where community spread is substantial, and that requires a different conversation. Secondly, we were very intentional about our phased-in return because it gives us an opportunity to learn what works, make adjustments before we take the next step to bring more students in. We've got a two-step process before the end of September with K2 students starting next Monday and a plan for 3-5 students to come beginning on September 29th. In each step of the process, we've allowed ourselves the ability to hit the pause button, to adapt or modify based on what we've learned. And in every case, we've said, whatever plan we put forward and adopt, it has to be reversible in the event that we have to go back to all online. So all of those things are part of the ongoing planning. None of the potential changes that we're considering are without some set of challenges. And as you know, not every family will have their needs met perfectly. We talked about this at the last meeting. However, I do believe fundamentally that it's important. We made the decision to return to in-person learning because it was what our students needed, and particularly K2. And so my recommendation and our belief is that we should continue to move forward with that plan. And we'll, in the presentation on safety and protocols, we'll talk a little bit about how some of that's unfolding. I also want to point out I had a conversation with superintendents in the North Valley Education Consortium today, and some of our neighboring districts have already started. Fountain Hills started with their hybrid September 8th. Cave Creek started full return in person. And while they have a mask-wearing requirement, they do not have any limitations on the number of students in the elementary. And as of yesterday, things seem to be going pretty well in the elementary there. Dysart had brought back K4 students and as well as freshmen this week, and they're bringing back all the rest of the students next week. Deer Valley's on a timeline that by the end of the month, they will also have a phased-in return. And what we're observing is that there's a commitment to implementing the mitigation strategies, that wearing a mask is absolutely critical. The hand washing protocol, the symptom screening before people come in, all of those things which CDC strongly recommends are implemented. It's a common commitment across the valley. And those who are ahead of us in terms of returning to learn in person have actually been giving positive reports, both from staff as well as students. Does that mean that it's 100% positive? No. There are some teachers who are not happy. There are some families who are not happy. But the overwhelming response has been positive. And that made me think that I should also point out something about our own Scottsdale Unified School District experience. We've been operating our enhanced distance learning camp since August 10th. 5 different locations. The numbers haven't been huge, but we've had anywhere from 40 to 85 students on a daily basis at these various locations. We haven't had one case of COVID in any one of our EDL camps that we're aware of. And we do have a pretty clear reporting protocol if someone does have a case. So not staff and none known with our families. We also, during the summer when we were running our camps, we did have a few cases where we knew students tested positive for COVID. They isolated as required by the Maricopa County Department of Public Health, and we have no record or evidence of any transmission of COVID within the summer camp. So those incidents were isolated. So it leads me to argue that when we put the proper strategies in place in terms of mitigation and have those protocols and we follow them clearly, we have the ability to reduce the risk. And in fact, in our own experience, we have not had any spread of COVID in programs that we've operated with students this year. So, there will be an opportunity for Q&A during the presentation on this. I just wanted to kind of outline some of where we are in that thinking. I think there's another bit of good news that's important to share, because we are truly committed to continuing to ensure that we're implementing the mitigation strategies, ensuring that we have personal protective equipment, And we received from the city of Phoenix a gift that was worth $36,286. It included 16,788 masks, 110 hand sanitizers, 552 gowns, and that will be on a future board agenda for gift acceptance, but it was a part of a distribution that they had, and because we've got schools that have Phoenix mailing addresses, we were able to benefit from their generosity as well, and we think that's a positive. The last thing that I would like to point out this evening is that this is National Hispanic Heritage Month from September 15th to October 15th. And while there'll be many activities associated with this during the next month, I just wanted to share a little bit about in Coronado what a few teachers are doing. Alexis Smith and Jocelyn Simpson, English teachers, are starting their classes each day with a quick overview of a book written by a Hispanic author. The book features Latinx characters, and most of these books are available for checkout by the students through those teachers' libraries. Secondly, Tatiana Martinez Rosenol, a Spanish teacher, has a focus on Hispanic heritage in her Spanish class. And one of the things that will be a highlight this week is Mexican Independence Day, which is tomorrow. So as a district, we have an opportunity to acknowledge the large number of students of Hispanic heritage within our school district, and it's a learning opportunity for those who are not as well. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that that's happening this month. With that concludes my comments this evening, Madam President.
Thank you very much. We will be moving on to public comment, and since it is the end of the superintendent's comments, we will be shutting off the telephone. If you could not get through, or you were in line and you didn't get in the queue, please go ahead and just send us an email to the governing board through the website, and we will read and we will hear what your comment would have been. And just put public comment with the date of the meeting today, September 15th, 2020, because we do want to hear from you. So all public comment, consent agenda, non-agenda items will be heard at this time, and I'm wondering how many callers we happen to have. IT?
There's only one caller at the time.
Okay, well, that'll make
We
it
have
easy. We
two
don't have to
callers.
consider anything different. You said one? Two. Two callers. All right, thank you. So we will patch you through to the meeting, and you'll be announced by name, and at that point, the caller will have 3 minutes to speak. A tone will sound to alert you that you have 30 seconds remaining, and at the end of 3 minutes, your time to speak will end. So, Vice President Beckman, we won't need actually the manual reminders today, because they're going to be testing it out and doing it digitally. So there's some proper technical protocols we'd like each caller to adhere to. Please mute your computer sound when it is your turn to speak, and do not put the call on speaker phone. Thank you very much. All right. Debbie, if you would begin.
We have
From
Georgia
Jonathan?
Valos on the line with us.
I'm sorry, John, could you say the name again?
Georgia Valos.
Okay, thank you. Hello, Georgia.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. First, I wanted to thank you all for your bravery and commitment to work through COVID-19 disease. And I am very happy to hear about your mitigating strategies and the flexibility to reverse basically everything, and all the decisions you're making could be reversed based on the outcome of the spread of disease. And I wanted to talk about that because you did say that you've been using EDL camps sort of as a petri dish to look at how the disease would spread with 40 to 80 kids together in those camp facilities. I'm curious what a kind of ventilation you used, what was the success? Because the question that I have is specifically directed to the facility directors, managing the risk load for fresh air and the normalization plan to support ventilation for social distancing. If air quality is affected by both the transmission of an airborne COVID-19 disease And air quality is also possibly going to be affected by the 3 West Coast states that we have on fire, blowing smoke across Arizona and throughout the United States. What have you thought about the possibility of using ultraviolet lights to exit and enter the schools, as they're doing at airports and homes, which have had cleaning done specific for COVID-19 disease? So that is where my questions are heading, but I definitely wanted to say thank you for providing this opportunity to connect with you and for the great job that I feel the entire SUSD school district has been doing.
Thank you, Georgia. All right. Jonathan, the next caller.
We have Melissa Erickson on the line.
Okay. Hello, Melissa.
Hello?
Okay, you may go ahead and give your comment.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thanks for taking the time to listen. I appreciate everything that all of you have been thinking through and all of the time and thought that's gone into all of this. I have students at both Hopi and Ingleside, and we've been in the process of making this decision for them over the last few days. And I've spoken to people on campus, and I guess really my comment is more kind of echoing what was sort of just discussed about the fact that the natural hybrid hasn't really presented itself on those campuses. And the feedback that I was told from folks in the office is that it's looking like on those campuses somewhere around 80% and upwards is going to be returning. And so my concern was just really about those numbers. And I know that where the metrics are at right now, we're in yellow, which should be the hybrid. And I understand after listening to that definition that I guess we are still within the hybrid, but I don't think that those numbers were probably quite what everybody was anticipating by the word hybrid. And so I'm just wondering if there will be an opportunity to readdress on those particular campuses where the numbers are higher and the space is smaller and we're looking at having a large population back on campus. Is there going to be an opportunity to readdress that and look at a truer hybrid, a schedule that alternates or minimizes the amount of students on campus at one time? So I guess that's what my concern was and what I wanted to voice tonight. And that's pretty much it. I may not have used the full 3 minutes, but that was it.
Well, thank you very much, Melissa. I think you'll be interested in hearing our information and discussion items today on safety protocols and mitigation
Thanks so much.
strategies. Thank you. Jonathan, we had 2 callers, correct? Yeah, that's it. Okay, thank you so much. All right, we will move on to our information and discussion items. As I just said, it will be on safety protocols and mitigation strategies. I believe Dennis Rayler is here, or Dr. Sakos is coming up.
Team of 3.
And who was
So, and Dr. Hagigat.
And Dr. Hagigat. There we are. Right.
If I could
Thank
give
you.
props to particularly Dr. Sakos, who is our incident commander as we continue to navigate the COVID crisis. She has graciously agreed to kind of set the stage and outline where we've been and where we are. And then Dennis is here to talk about the specific facilities and mitigation strategies, and Dr. Hagigat is here to talk about next steps as we begin to implement this next week with K-2 students. Dr. Sakos.
All right, thank you, Dr. Menzel. Madam President, members of the board, as Dr. Menzel said, tonight I'll lead off the discussion on safety protocols and mitigation strategies for our return to learn, and then turn it over to Dennis, and then Dr. Hagigat will finish it up. So just in terms of process and procedures and priorities, we, of course, are operating under the incident command structure and have been doing so since March. And within that structure, we have an operations and logistics group that Dennis has led a subcommittee. The The categories within operations and logistics is quite large. You'll see here it focuses on health and safety, facilities, nutritional services, transportation, and athletics. So I do want to mention that within these categories, we do have district personnel specialized in these areas that do assist. So specific to health and safety, we do have our two lead nurses, Leslie Sharp and Renee Tosto, who are on teams tonight to answer any specific questions. We also have, of course, Dennis, his crew has been working on facilities, nutritional services, Patty Bilbrey, transportation, Brendan Wagner, and then athletics, Nathan Slater. So I'll begin talking about the health and safety components that are listed here, and then turn it over to Dennis, and he will address the additional areas. Personal protective equipment. We've been hearing a lot about PPE back beginning in March, and that is the exact time in which Scottsdale began ordering supplies. When we thought we were going to return for a brief stint back after the spring break, but we never did. So we actually began orders, and needless to say, supply and demand really delayed the time in which we received a lot of these items. But to date, we have received a substantial amount of items, and as of today, was the last distribution of all of these items to all of our schools. Naturally, priorities went to our elementary schools, and then our K-12 special education campuses. So I'm not going to read all of the PPE, but that gives you a snapshot of all of the PPE that we have received and have been distributed not only to our campuses, but then also to other district offices and facilities. So transportation department to be equipped with the buses, the Mojave District Annex, a number of our facilities that will also need PPE. In terms of mask compliance, we've really tried to take a proactive approach on mask compliance. And at the September 1st board meeting, you'll recall that Ms. Marshall brought back for a second time regulations in the categories of staff, student, and visitors in school. Although we are currently do not have any visitors in school, it's important to know that there is a mask regulation that does require visitors to wear a mask, as does our staff and our students as well. We have been doing frequent notifications, external communication, web information. Our schools have been reiterating that information. We'll continue to layer that as principals reinforce the reopening of schools, all of those requirements. Every year we do a student release form and an affirmation of residency, part of our yearly process. Embedded within that includes a COVID acknowledgement, and the language came directly from the trust. And so in that, parents have to go through and acknowledge the different areas, and it's an acknowledgement form. And so that is something that we work closely with Ms. Marshall to include in parent view. In order to ensure compliance, schools have directions in order to look at who is missing, going through and acknowledging that, and are reminding parents to go back and take a look at that. But it'll be a continual education process for our parents and for our students. Part of the teaching expectations for our students has begun. We started with our pre-K 2, and within the Student Services Department, Ms. Cron and her team have worked on videos, social stories to really help with teaching those expectations, and that schools have focused on that, or will focus on that at the latter part of this week in order to reinforce wearing it at home. I know special education did the same thing, and teachers worked with students prior to the return and practicing wearing masks at home and in riding in the car, but practicing was a big piece of that. And as Dr. Menzel mentioned, we have all been pleasantly surprised that the mask compliance with our students so far has been outstanding, even with some of our special education students that otherwise might pose a challenge. They have been doing it. So and those students who aren't quite used to it, those teaching opportunities still happen with their teacher. So we're very excited about that. Specific to code or enforcement of the mask to students, we do have our code of conduct, and I'm referencing verbiage within 2 pages of the code of conduct, page 13 and page 30. On page 13, in part, there is some verbiage that talks about risk to health, safety, and general welfare of students and staff. Therefore, we did not add anything specific within the code, but we did add it into the student and parent acknowledgement. And in terms of consequences for the violation, in addition to Article B, which I'm going to show you next, is the rubric. Students will be asked to put on a mask, will be provided a mask. So I've said this in the board meeting before, I forgot my pencil, we're going to give it to you. Repeat offenders and non-compliance will result in individual school discipline, and that's my next slide. And then systematic non-compliance may result in school closure in order to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of all students and staff. And we certainly hope we don't get to that point, because we do have many of our families who are ready to return to learn. On that page 30, in the Code of Conduct is mask compliance. So I just took a snapshot of that, and you'll see our code has been grade level specific. So if you see at the top there, K5, 6, 8, 9, 12, and then under dress code, you will see where there are minimum and maximum consequences. So again, our approach is to be preventative, to teach the behavioral expectations. You know, students forget their ID, they're going to forget their mask. We really want to help students remember and teach them proper storage. But for those that are repeat offenders, that are being difficult, have something inappropriate on their mask, that's going to be addressed within the dress code in the Code of Conduct. This next slide here, I put a hard copy, a larger one, on your table, and hopefully this will help a little bit, but this is our COVID-19 response plan. And I'm not going to go through every single area here, frankly, because I cannot read how small it is. But it's important to note that there are procedures for when we have a confirmed case of COVID, when there is a staff or student that's experiencing COVID-19 symptoms, when a student or staff member are in close contact with an individual, and when a student and staff member have a household contact. And so there are very specific steps that have to be taken, and our lead nurses are the primary ones who have been training our nurses, and our nurses have been training our staff, and that all occurred beginning 2 weeks ago. And it's important to note that our nurses will be that primary point of contact with Maricopa County Department of Public Health. So with that, everything that we have done, we have looked at the Center for Disease Control, CDC, Maricopa County Department of Public Health, Arizona Department of Health Services, and then Arizona Interscholastic Association, AIA, because athletics comes into play as well. So all of that continues to and will continue to be part of our staff education and training. And again, our nurses are going to be the ones that are collaborating and taking guidance from Maricopa County Department of Public Health, as they have done in the past with any communicable disease, even though this is still considered a pandemic. I want to point out that our nurses have worked very closely with the school principals over the last several weeks to identify an additional space for the quarantine room. So very similar to when you go into a pediatrician's office, you're going to see a well side and a sick side. That is exactly what they have done. And so they, of course, are, and we're very fortunate, thank you, for continuing to support RNs on our campuses, because as trained RNs, they have an extensive amount of training on how to deal with types of diseases, and will adhere to the protocols under their licensure, and then those added protocols that we have put in place as a school district as well. So with that, I'm very happy to announce or introduce Mr. Rayler, who's going to talk to us, kind of take us through before we arrive on campus, on the buses, in the classrooms, in our cafeterias, and in our athletic field. So,
Dr. Sakis, before
sure.
you leave, I'd like to open it up in case somebody has a question.
I tried to run fast. It didn't happen, did it? That's okay.
Okay. Vice President Beckman.
So some of my questions probably most likely will be trailer. But first, thank you. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions, all of us tonight. And I wanted to say to our community, I think all of us have received quite a few emails from our community, which is very welcome. We'd like to hear from you with regard to your concerns, and hopefully they get addressed in the meetings. I personally cannot respond to every single one. So what I do is I commit to reading them and then picking out some of the common questions and challenges, and I will ask them as I see them tonight come up. One of the first ones, and this may be for Ms. Marshall, again, because you mentioned it, I would like someone to define the difference between our acknowledgement and our waiver.
So, I'll have to give you my space.
Thank you, Board Member Beckman. Sorry, had to get that COVID brain straight. Let me give the disclaimer that I can't give legal advice to our stakeholders who might be listening. The general difference between a waiver and acknowledgement: the waiver is an agreement stating that the person agrees not to sue the district should something happen related to COVID. The acknowledgement is more of a statement of, I recognize that there's this COVID-19 pandemic, and despite SUSD's best efforts, I might get it if I come onto SUSD's property. It's not saying, I won't sue if that happens and I think you're at fault. It's saying, I recognize and assume the risk by stepping onto your property.
Thank you. And Dr. Sakos, it was a bit in your presentation, but it may fall more under Mr. Rayler's with regard to the PPE and what we have ordered. You lightly touched on this. How is this going to be distributed, and what is the process for reordering at our schools? This could go on for quite a while, and I want to see what we're anticipating. And for instance, if a teacher runs out of something or if a principal runs out of something, how are we going to prevent them from being out of what they need?
So the original distribution prioritized stocking our health offices, and our lead nurses looked at those items that are necessary in the health office, so which would be different from the classroom. For example, gowns, a medical grade disinfectant in their offices. So we began, and our nurses helped prioritize stocking our health offices, and then we moved to special education. Special education naturally may require some face shields in addition to the face masks, or some clear masks for speech and occupational therapy. And then after we identified those, and again, the warehouse kept an inventory, which was quite robust. And then we looked at the number of, and Ms. Crozier has, I should give her a lot of credit for this, so we looked at the number of teachers and staff on a school's campus, and then they had a standard amount of supplies that were going to be sent, that were sent over. Each school is now responsible for monitoring their supply, and will place orders directly through the warehouse between Ms. Crozier and Eva Dino in order to get more supplies. So we continue, or I should say, warehouse continues to order the items that we know that we will use, and in some cases, it's a matter of supply and demand. But I'm glad that we began ordering all this back in March and stockpiling, because we were able to nicely equip our campuses K-12 and some of our other buildings, and like I said, our departments, like for instance, nutritional services throughout the spring, throughout the summer, and then now transportation. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. I appreciate that there's a process, because, my concern obviously stems from, we haven't done this before. We haven't ordered these types of materials. So, anticipating how much we'll need is primarily just a guess, right? And I would hope, and I'm sure you're doing a great job, and Mr. Rayler is, that we don't run into a situation where we find out of something and we didn't anticipate it, and we're, not being as safe and cautious as we should be.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss if I did not mention that we, again, have very generous families in our community, and some have worked with their school principals to go above and beyond what was we originally promised our campuses. So thank you out there to our parent groups and organizations, as mentioned, the City of Phoenix, who have continued to donate supplies. So with them. I'm confident that we'll be able to maintain the adequate amount, and adequate's not the right word, the appropriate amount of PPE on our campuses.
Okay. I think my next questions will be for Mr. Rayler, because they're more about the processes and what we're going to be doing through the day, so I'll wait for those. Thank
Okay.
you. Okay.
And I'd like to follow up because I had similar questions to that. So for our sites, they are going to just order it using our typical protocol for how to order Kleenex boxes. They will just be doing that through the warehouse. So the sites have all been trained on how to order for PPE.
Yes, so typically, these types of orders, and again, I can't say typically because we're in a pandemic, but I mean, if they were ordering paper or even just standard nurse supplies, they would typically go to our approved vendors and order it themselves. Our purchasing department has worked with our warehouse to order bulk. So right now, they're ordering from SUSD warehouse, and we're trying to get everything in bulk. One, cost savings, and then two, because we need to stockpile and have ample supply.
So what I think, as I was reading the emails too, what the community wants to know, and I think that if they can hear that from you, since we don't have exactly what went to every site, do we have adequate PPE for all of our sites when we start school on the designated dates that we have set up?
Yes, we have appropriate PPE for all of our offices, our classrooms, our staff, extras for our students, so we are ready to go.
Okay, great, thank you. All right. Board Member Kravitz.
So this is what was sent to our school sites. So can I make the leap that there's additional materials at the warehouse right now? My concern is the school runs low. They say, well, we need more face masks. And then they go contact the warehouse, and the warehouse says we're on order. They're on order right now, when the school needs them yesterday.
So we're very fortunate to have a phased approach. And so our orders are out there. What seems to be, and Mr. Rayler can add to this or correct me if I'm wrong, what seems to be really in high demand is plexiglass. I think some of these other items we've been able to get, but there are some things like plexiglass that have become the new platinum. And a little bit harder to get and much more costly. But some of these basic supplies here, again, we've been fortunate to, some of them did take a couple of months, but fortunately we began ordering back in March. So we're fortunate to have this, and yes, we're going to continue to order. And I know Ms. Kozier's listening very closely, going, okay, I'm going to make sure I've stockpiled that warehouse, and they have plenty of money to do it.
We've actually already put in orders, so we didn't send everything out.
Oh, okay.
Right, so they only sent out what the schools needed to start up with, and there are some things still in the warehouse, but they're, again.
Oh, okay. I know, I just am familiar with when we had problems where schools needed, copy paper, and there was no copy paper to be found in the warehouse or anywhere, so.
So we purposely left a small percentage, or small amount of supplies in the warehouse. As we were distributing, we've been ordering more and more. So we have those supplies coming in right now.
Okay, great.
As we're going.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Sakos? All right,
All
thank
right,
you very
well,
much, Dr. Sakos.
You're welcome, thank you. And without
Thank
any
you.
further ado, Mr. Rayler, it's all yours. Oops. There we go.
Good evening, President Beckham, members of the board, Dr. Menzel. Thank you for having me. We'll be here until about 11. So we've got about 65 slides, but we want to make sure we get all the information out there. So you'll have no questions by the time I'm done. So this first slide, I really wanted to lay out the presentation so that it's how the day goes, chronologically, what's first, what's next. And so we're going to address all those things as a student, as parents, as they work through their day. They're going to be able to see how we're managing each and every area. The very first thing you'll see are our signage that's been distributed to all the campuses. As I've been through some of the campuses, some are not fully done yet. They haven't done their application of the signs, but they're also the campuses that aren't seeing students immediately. So the signage is there. We've got small ones, we've got big ones. We've got it so that it's almost a subliminal message for them. Every time they open a door, they're going to see a sign to remind them to wear their mask or to social distance or whatever the case may be. So let's get you started. One of the very first things that we like to do before our students even get out of bed, mom and dad need to be thinking about making sure that that student is okay to go to school. One of the biggest things, aside from masks and washing hands, is not sending a sick student to school to begin with. So we need to make sure that those students that might be showing symptoms, and we've provided a magnet of this design to all of our families so that they have that information at the ready, hopefully on their fridge for when they get their milk for their morning coffee. So that's moment one, when we wake up and get out of bed. We want our parents to be our partners. The only way that we're going to survive this and thrive and keep the kids in school is if we're not sending sick kids to school. So we want kids to stay home when sick. We want our staff to stay home when sick. Everyone's in this, and the only way we get out of it is everyone doing their part. So we're expecting that parents will do their morning assessment of their child and make sure that they're not in a position to bring illness to the campus. Because of not all of our schools have water bottle fill stations, we want to encourage people to bring water bottles with them, pre-filled, ready to go. One note is that the food service department will have water available at lunchtime. So if they get through their water bottle midday, they'll be able to get water bottles at lunchtime. So we want to make sure that that's happening. Most of our drinking fountains, that mouthpiece, right, that's going to be the problem. Kids like to put their face way too close to it, so we're going to have to secure those. But we won't make it so that there's no water available. We've got the ability to get water. Sometimes it won't be filtered water, and we all know how unfiltered water tastes in Arizona. So we really need our parents to update their parent view contact information, because we need that person that's going to come pick up a sick child to be somewhere in the state, somewhere here where they can come and get that child. There have been times where grandma's on the list and grandma's in Michigan. So emergency contact, great, but not able to come and get a symptomatic child. So we want to make sure parent view is updated and that we are able to get those children from the school. Because if we do have a lot of kids getting sick, we only have so much space in the quarantine areas to store those kids, to keep the kids. So we want to make sure that people are getting to those children quickly. Everything we do, everything our nurses, all the guidance that they're getting is coming from Maricopa County Department of Public Health. That is the source. That is where our nurses are listening in to the webinars weekly. One of them mentioned to me yesterday that the county, each meeting says this material is valid today, because we know how much it changes day by day by day. So they're staying on top of that, and we really appreciate the work that our school nurses are doing. On our buses, so after we get ready, we've had a good breakfast, we're ready to go to school, and we're going to hop on the bus. Tom Pekanik is our model here for our transportation department, and you'll see that our drivers will be masked. Our buses are labeled with reminders for masking. Social distancing or physical distancing becomes difficult. Those larger routes becomes difficult, but if we're wearing our masks, We're in much, much better shape than if we are not. So that is our primary reminder as people enter the buses. So all parties on the buses will wear masks. The buses are all equipped with extra PPE for riders that show up without a mask. We don't want to leave anyone at the bus stop. We're not going to leave anybody in the dark. We're going to take them to school. We're going to give them a one-use mask so that they can get on the bus. The buses will be inspected daily, and they will clean after every bus run. And then air conditioning, we're going to talk a little bit more about air conditioning. Air conditioning on the bus and air movement on the bus is equally as important on the bus as it is when we get into our classrooms. On our campuses, this is a recent photo of Cheyenne, and those are 2 brand-new hand wash stations so that we can try to, and I want to be clear about this because some people have asked, we have all the hand wash stations we really need in the buildings that we have. Every bathroom has a hand wash station. Classrooms at the K5, K8 level all have sinks in the classrooms. When the committee met originally, we wanted to create more opportunities so that as they're passing, as they're going to lunch, can they wash their hands faster with more? So it's not that we had a shortage of hand wash stations. And anecdotally, over at Sequoia, we installed a couple of hand wash stations a couple years back. And we just found 2 random locations that we could tie into easily. And Veronica will tell you that her illnesses on the campus went down. No data for that, but anecdotally, she says, hey, once we started washing our hands more and had that availability, so we took that, and that's why we made that recommendation for additional hand wash stations. But it's not that we don't meet health code. We've got the sinks. We've got everything where it needs to be. We just wanted to have more for more opportunities, okay? Visitors to our campus. I think that Ms. Bono at Redfield said it best. If you are not on my staff and you are not my student, we are going to ask you politely that you not come on our campus. In order to manage risk, in order to reduce the number of people that could expose our teachers, our students, we're just going to ask for now that people just stay away. We want to make sure that we do not yo-yo back and forth from in class to out of class because we've had a case in a classroom or a case, multiple cases in the building. So that means a lot to a lot of people because we have a very, very active Scottsdale community that loves being in our schools. We know that we're asking a lot, but we're going to ask that just for now. Let's try and get learning happening first. Let's get the kids back in school. Let's make sure that they're doing that, and then we'll start looking at that policy and that procedure of bringing people back. So no drop-off delivery of items. If they forget, they forget. The teacher will be understanding, and we'll manage through that. Front desk, copy center help, that's a big deal. We've actually done some rework in some of our front offices when we did the security upgrades to make sure that the copy centers were available. So we're gonna not move forward with that. The work's done, but allowing people to come in and do that work is just one more exposure to our students and staff. No classroom volunteers, and we ask that parents make a phone call and ask for an appointment to see the principal, to see the psychologist, to make an appointment first and arrange for that activity. Fortunately, now that all of our front offices have been remodeled, we have a conference room in nearly every front office that you don't have to actually go onto campus. You'll stay right there in the front office area We can sanitize that area when the appointment's over, and it will help us manage without letting people onto campus and that chance of people cross-contaminating. No visitors to campus. My Ops and Logistics Committee told me I better say it more than once. So we've laid out the fact that we're wearing masks. It's important to wear a mask. It's important to wash your hands. And all of those things are going to be reinforced on a daily basis. I'm sure they're already talking about them on online classes and what that expectation is going to be. But we really want those little things that are going to make such a big difference: washing hands, wearing masks. Hand sanitizer, we initially were trying to keep the hand sanitizer away from the littles, just not wanting to expose them to the 75% alcohol. But we're ending up having to do it, just because the concern that we've heard is that we want them everywhere. We want them in as many places and as convenient as they can be. So we've got hand washing opportunities at the elementary schools, but we also have hand sanitizing opportunities as well. So if they're just walking down the hallway and they want to hit a squirt and take care of that business, then they can do that. Borrowing and sharing of items will be restricted. That's one of those things that, especially at the elementary level, they have a difficult time with that, because that's what they do, right? And I've had some conversations with some kindergarten teachers that want to poke my eyes out because they don't want to hear that they can't use those toys and those centers to teach their kids, because that's a big part of their learning. But we're asking that we try and restrict that so that we're not having to sanitize that all the time. Now, if a teacher is making a commitment that she's going to do that hand sanitizing or that sanitizing all the time on their own, well, that's a discussion that they can have with their principal. But our recommendation from the committee is to not have all the sharing. As Dr. Sacco shared, health offices, we've been putting up plexiglass barriers. We've ordered other plexiglass barriers. We've installed windows in solid core doors so that they can supervise those areas where kids will be isolated while they wait for mom and dad. Across the elementary schools, 32 stainless steel multi-faucet hand washing stations, as I showed on Cheyenne, are being installed. We've got 2 great general contractors working with us. They've given us, we actually purchased the faucets and the sinks ourselves, so we didn't have to pay those extra general conditions and markup. Worked with 2 different vendors to try and make sure we got them all on time. We are actually still waiting for a few of them from one of our vendors. But our contractors are going through, prepping the walls, prepping the sewer and the water, so when they do show up, we're going to slam those right in. In lieu of, and again, it's not that we didn't have enough, I just wanted to have extra. So while we're waiting for those few units that remain to be delivered, we'll have hand sanitizer stands in their place. Okay? So, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. That is like the #1 topic. And unfortunately, Mother Nature and the fires in California do absolutely nothing good for outside air. Everything you read, it's better to be outside. If you are asthmatic and you are not experiencing symptoms of some kind because of the fires and because of the particulates in the air, count your blessings. When you wake up in the morning and you look to the sun and it's still orange, that's all the particulates coming from California and some in our own state. So what we did from the very beginning, and I'll let you in on a little secret, maintenance guys aren't perfect. But over the years, before I say but, over the years, we get complaints about humidity. We get complaints about it's too hot in here. and we have a set point, but we also have outside air coming in to all of our buildings. All of our buildings, not one exception, has outside air coming in. Depending on the age of that building will depend on the percentage, the number of cubic feet per minute. There's a lot of variables depending on the construction date of the building. But all of our buildings have outside air. Some people call it fresh air. Look outside and you can't call it fresh air. Ozone's through the roof, the particulate matter is through the roof. So having that outside air coming in really might not be a great thing, but we know that that outside air dilutes the air that's inside, and so if you have airborne coronavirus, then you're at least breaking that down and diluting it. So one of the things, there are so many things. I can't tell you how many emails I've gotten over the last 6 months for UV, for ozone, for all kinds of things. And I would hate to say that there's a price for everything or there's a price that's too high. But we have nearly 5 million square feet of buildings, over 2,500 AC units, whether they're fan coils, VRVs, whatever the case may be. To outfit every classroom, to outfit every fan coil unit, to outfit every with whatever the latest and greatest is, would be extremely expensive. And for just about everything, whether it's the UV conversation, and there's two sides of the story. And I'm not going to profess to be the guy to get those answers, but we've worked with a couple of engineering firms talking about what the best solution is. And hands down, outside air, making sure we're getting that outside air, and filtration. So we've moved forward with increasing the quality of our filtration to MERV 13. Smaller particulates, higher efficiency in pulling out those particulates from the air. Dave Downing, our vendor, is moving rapidly through our schools. As you can imagine, there's however many thousands of school districts in the state or in the country that are all asking for MERV 13 right now, because that's the recommendation coming out of the engineers. So they got a truckload, they're working on our stuff, we've given them the priority of start at pre-K and work your way through the building, and if that means stop at 5th grade until you get the next load and then circle back to that school, they've agreed to do that for us. We've been partners with Dave Downing for many, many years, and they're doing fantastic work for us to make sure that we're all filtered up in time for school to start. I may have a few principals mad at me right now. I sent this email out just before the meeting. So recess, playgrounds, and play equipment. Our discussion in ops and logistics yesterday, as we finalized another update of our recommendation, is let's try to get to the education part first. Recess is super important. Everybody knows that. They need to go stretch their legs. They need to get the wrinkles out, and they need to go be kids. But the committee asked that, hey, can we just be a little bit more stringent early on? Just for these early weeks, let's focus on school. Let's not worry about playground equipment, the jungle gyms, the balls and the footballs and all of that. So our recommendation at this point is that that the campuses create opportunities for structured play during recess, something that's inclusive and respects physical distancing. And Shannon Cron, I know some some PE teachers at Hopi that do some amazing things. There's a way to do that. There's a way forward to try and keep that physical distancing, still be able to play, not necessarily share things. So we're going to try and work with the principals post haste and make sure that's taken care of. Masks are to be worn during recess. That's a tough one because some say, well, when I'm doing an aerobic activity, I should take my mask off. The gym rats would argue that, hey, if I have to wear a mask while I'm at the gym, then you can wear the mask when you're at. And it ultimately became, let's just try and focus on keeping us all healthy just in the early stages. So we've got a note in here that we're going to revisit that after fall break. And if things are looking good, we've got 2 or 3 weeks under our belts, then maybe that could be relaxed. But for the time being, again, we take our lead from Maricopa County Health Services, and we want to make sure that student learning is first and foremost. So in our classrooms, this is actually a picture of Laguna and the kindergarten classroom. And if you've been in a kindergarten classroom, this is not how they normally look. The bright colored tables is awesome, but usually they're clustered together for kids to collaborate. And so they've been spread out, and I don't know that I can say it enough in the presentation, but our objective is if you are wearing a mask, in order to get the kids into the classroom, 3 feet of distancing is our goal. If we can get that, then we can get those numbers a little bit higher in the classrooms, but it's still not 3 feet of distance, and when you look at this, they're really spread out. It creates some challenges. So wearing a mask is key. Washing those hands is key. I can't say it enough. So this is a setup of a kindergarten classroom at Laguna. So this picture is a picture of fourth grade at Laguna. Again, much different than what they would normally have it set up because they would typically have it in more of a collaborative setup, 4, 5, 6 desks clustered together. So this is going to be very different for teachers to be able to teach. But in order to meet the numbers that we need, this is where we've landed, 3 feet of distance with masks. We're going to do our cleaning on a regular basis, and I've got a schedule that I'm going to show you. We're going to have hand sanitizer to get available, and we're going to make sure that the high traffic areas are taken care of most frequently. We're going to encourage teachers to prop open their doors, something that you will never hear out of my mouth again. To prop open, I just said it again. To prop open their doors during transition times, because that's one less high touch point that we have to really concern ourselves with. So as they prop their doors, and depending on the school, we've got schools with doors that are in hallways, we've got schools that are open to the outside air. I'm praying every night that we somehow break in this weather and we start getting some nice weather, because quickly into late October, we could start opening those doors and getting that fresh air all the time. So that it's a struggle, and if we continue in those 100+ degree temperatures in the coming weeks, it doesn't help us in our fight here. So I've provided this sample sanitizing schedule. I had a big old paragraph in there, and Dr. Hagigott made me take it out. So basically, every school is different. Every school is shaped different. The bell schedule is different. There's a lot of things that are different about it. So I've asked our facility coordinators to put together a schedule in which they and their FSW will walk the campus. I failed to put a picture in here of the electrostatic machines that we have, some on order. We ordered them in May, and they are still coming from somewhere, some unknown place. So in the meantime, since we knew we weren't getting those on time, we went out and we bought backpack sprayers. Some people would use them for spraying their weeds, and instead we bought them brand new, no weed chemical inside, and that will use those temporarily to spray some of those high touch points. The big thing with sanitizing, there's cleaning, which physically you're touching and rubbing the dirt off, and there's sanitizing. Now, preferably, we would like to clean first and then sanitize, because we get the dirt off, and anything underneath that dirt, we could then take care of through sanitizing. But we're just gonna, as we go through the day, we're gonna walk that campus regularly, high touch points, faucets, anything that the kids are touching regularly, even corners of walls. If you, I noted the other day, I walked into someone's office and I put my hand up against their window, the window frame. Well, who's gonna think to clean that window frame later? So we're just kind of spraying in all these areas where we think people are going to be touching. The chemical dries in a matter of a few minutes, and once its dwell time has been achieved, we just leave it, we just move on. And then at night, as the ABM crews are really, we've bumped them up a little bit to actually show up while we're still in school, and in hopes that some of that cleaning effort will provide some confidence for our teachers that, hey, yeah, we see ABM here, they're doing a good job, they're taking care of business. On a meeting the other day, Grace over at Cheyenne shared that her ABM crew is doing a fantastic job. So we're going to make sure that all of the custodial crews are doing the best that they can do for our kids. Okay, in our cafeterias. So I stood on a ladder, very unsafe, to try and get this picture to make sure that we could show you what a cafeteria looks like. Very, very, very different from what it was pre-COVID. There's dots on those seats, and there's only going to be 2 children per table to achieve that social distancing or that physical distancing. 6 feet of distance without a mask. And many would prefer even more distance than that. But we do have to feed the kids. We got to get them through. So the 6 feet of distance applies whether you're feeding them in the classroom or feeding them in the cafeteria. So if there's a classroom, let's say of 25, you cannot achieve that 6 foot of distance, so we need to look at an alternative. Maybe they do need to go into the cafeteria. Again, if the weather breaks, if Mother Nature would give us a break, we can get those tables swung outside and create all kinds of other opportunities outside. But at 105, at 12:30 in the afternoon, who wants to be outside? Because we really don't have enough shade to make that happen. At one point, someone had suggested that, hey, just get more shade. Well, like everything else, supply and demand is atrocious right now. And so anything that we would have tried to order would have been weeks and weeks to get. And some of our shade structures require city permitting, engineering, and other things. So we do have a lot of shade on our campuses, and I know that our principals will get creative as we see the weather turn. So we did order 100 new tables, 20 for each of the high school campuses. The convertible benches, because almost all of the high schools have the round or octagon-shaped tables where 6, 8, 10 kids can sit at. So cafeteria in the high schools, at the middle schools, is going to be a challenge. I believe that Dr. Sackos and her high school principals, her middle school principals are still working through that process. So the balance of this conversation is pre-K through 5. Based on the setup that we've shown, basically 2 classrooms can fit in there with a row that's unused. So that maximizes the distance in which they're unmasked and eating, and it also provides an opportunity for us to cohort those kids. So let's say, for instance, that we have 4 classes in first grade. They can have 2 out at the playground, 2 inside eating, and then they flip-flop. And then those 2 classes stay together all the time. So for lunch, they stay together all the time. This is not an easy task. If it was easy, anyone could do it. This will not be an easy task. I've already talked to some principals, and they're starting to rub their heads and see how they can make this happen. We're going to have to maybe make some adjustments to Hopi and Pima because they have the smaller cafeterias and flip-flop into their gymnasiums. So the social distancing or the physical distancing, the fact that they won't be wearing masks, and lost my train of thought. Cohorting, super important. So we're going to work with our principals in the next couple of days and talk about that. I think Dr. Hagigat has another meeting on Thursday with them tomorrow. So we'll be talking with that. In the setup, we've created lanes around the perimeter so that there's plenty of distance for the kids to walk by without the kids being seated, getting too close together. It was not an easy task, and it will not be an easy task. Feeding the kids and keeping them safe will be a bit of a challenge. Patty Bilbrey, probably one of the most amazing food service people that we have, child nutrition, or anyone could have. She will bend over backwards to make this work. And so she has a plan. It's essentially grab and go. Get them through the line as quickly as they can. USDA has said, well, hey, we're paying for lunches for the near term, so they don't even need to punch in the codes for the kids. They're as the kids are going to walk through, they're just going to, yep, you're a lunch. You're a lunch. So that'll make it easier. That'll make it faster. That'll probably increase their ability to get to their tables and start eating. And then again, like everything else, we're going to see how things go and then adjust as we see necessary. 6 feet of distancing plus without face coverings, without when you're not wearing your mask. That's our goal. If we can get the kids outside, all the better. If we can get it under shaded areas, all the better. So hopefully, again, I can't say it enough, we need the temperatures to go down. So I got voluntold that I get to do this slide, although I think we have Nathan Slater on the line in case we do have some questions. So last but not least, we go to the extracurricular stuff after school, and what is it that we're doing there? Well, fortunately, the athletes have been back for a little while now, and the trainers have all been trained, the coaches have all been trained, the kids are doing a good job, doing their best to keep their masks on when they're not in the thick of whatever activity that they're doing. And so we've got a lot of support at the athletic level and a lot of folks doing the right thing for those kids. For the time being, they've got the locker rooms closed, and they're asking the kids to bring their own water, much like we're going to do for those kids from bell to bell. I know that the locker room discussion is going to come back, and it'll come back soon because they have some issues with the equipment. Where is it stored, and how do we get to it, and all of that. So that locker room conversation will be coming back real soon. They're sanitizing, just like we're doing during the regular day, sanitizing frequently, making sure that the hand hygiene is being taken care of. So a lot of what we're doing already or talking about at the elementary and middle and high school level, we're carrying on to sports. And really, we're not carrying on to sports because sports started before us. They started their practices before the kids coming back to learn. Nathan's got here that the middle school sports look to resume October 12th, and then following the same safety protocols as the high schools and the same training that all of those coaches and trainers and assistant coaches received. So at this point, we can either tackle questions, although I don't think you guys have any. Before I introduce Dr. Hagigat.
And I think, we have questions for about another 5 hours, until 11?
I'm giving you guys a break, so.
No, you're going to be a hero because you get done before 11. I know that's what I said. Vice President Beckman.
Thanks, Dennis. I know this is been challenging for everyone, and I appreciate all your hard work. You know, it's new to you specifically, ordering all of this and making sure it gets here. I know it's tough. But having said that, I'm going to touch back on the PPE for 1 second.
Okay?
I'm just going to put it out there. I'm concerned we don't have enough. We have 1,500 classrooms, 3,000 total employees-ish, right? Somewhere. And you have 2,544 packages of antibacterial wipes and 2,460 bottles of sanitizer. And on this little sheet where you talk about cleaning, you say you're going to have hand sanitizer in all these spots and how many. And I know we have, I don't see paper towels on here, and I know we're going to be having people use spray bottles and whatnot. I'm just concerned we don't have enough.
So that list is only what was sent to schools. It's not what was sent to the MDA. It's not what was sent to facilities, to the main office. It's SPED. It is just what went to schools. Every single teacher received a bag that had hand sanitizer, a package of wipes, 2 masks, and a face shield. And then every other person in the office, instructional aides, paras, all also received hand sanitizer, 2 masks, and wipes, just for their personal use. Then we sent additional disposable masks for the office to have on hand. SPED was given additional gloves, face shields, and 95 masks to the nurse. So what you're seeing up there is not what went district-wide. That's just what went to our school
And I
sites.
appreciate that, but knowing that we have 1,500 classrooms and 2,544 things of hand sanitizer, or 2,400 hand sanitizers.
So we also pulled out we didn't include the SOL. So if you were teaching SOL, that's not included in there. So
Okay.
we pulled we actually took every single position out of our accounting software and said, okay, for each position, they need this, 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 and this, and sent that out.
And I can appreciate that. I just do not want to personally hear that teachers or our classified staff are buying their own supplies, truly. I think
Absolutely.
we really need to stay ahead of that.
So let me address that as well. So the numbers that you see there are what was sent out, not
Yes.
what's still left in the warehouse. Okay, we can follow up with that. There's really one item that is rare at this point, and that's the Clorox wipes, that style of wipe that is difficult to get. Otherwise, the hand sanitizer, there's more hand sanitizer out there than every brewery has turned into a hand sanitizer company. Hand sanitizer is not a problem. The source that we are using is Buckeye, and they have hand sanitizer by the pallets. That's not going to be an issue. The cleaning materials that we're putting in the bottles, and part of the reason that we used spray bottles and the trifold towels is because they weren't, other than the spray bottles, but we've now since gotten those, the chemical that we put in and the trifold towels, those are readily available. So we can order those and we know we're going to get them. It's the wipes that everyone thinks that, well, I'm going to wipe this down and I'm going to wipe that down and I'm going to wipe that down. Well, those wipes only last about half a desk. It's because it's supposed to stay wet for a certain amount of time, depending on the brand. It could be anywhere from 4 minutes to 6 minutes. So you would use literally 2 wipes per desk. And I think when IT was going through their process, they were using the wipes to wipe down the computers, and they were getting about 2 computers per wipe. So the wipes are the piece that we've kind of set aside. We've got some for each of the teachers, so they have their own personal supply for their personal area. But the spray bottles with the chemical inside and the trifold towels, that's what we're going to request that they use. They want to clean their desks in their classroom, and we're not even asking them to clean their desks. We're just saying, hey, if you have it, you can do it. If you don't, if you feel comfortable, your kids are all wearing their masks, they're washing their hands. If we're washing our hands and wearing our masks, how dirty is everything getting? So, we really did try to make sure that we were making common sense decisions about what was available back then and still now what's available now. So I hear you loud and clear. Teachers do not need to buy their stuff. We did hold back on all the materials and didn't deliver them intentionally hoping to see the whites of the children's eyes before we sent it out, because we didn't want it to get used up, because just literally weeks ago, things were much harder to get. So we wanted to make sure that what we had, what we knew we had, went out so that it could service the children. With nobody in a classroom except the teacher, or sanitizing shouldn't have been that much of a priority, because it's just literally them.
I appreciate that. I just don't want to create an environment where we have teachers or other employees concerned about using cleaning supplies and, when they need to be, because they're in short supply. So,
Yes.
no, I appreciate your answer and us just being on guard about it again. I know you touched on it. What is in that cleaning solution that we're spraying and is in the spray bottle? I mean, have we looked into that? Are we sure? I mean, we've had presentations before the board before
Yes.
about concerns about what these parents are concerned about.
So the product is Oxyfear, and it's a product that we've been using for a very long time. It's a hydrogen peroxide base, so it's not a bleach base. So that was based on the information that we gathered through our sales folks and all of that. That was the best product to be able to spray it, leave it, and then move on without having to worry about, like 409. If you use 409 at home, if you read the instructions, it tells you to clean the 409 after you've cleaned with 409. So we didn't want any of that. We wanted to make sure the product that we're putting on can go on the desk and it's not going to create any adverse conditions. We have the safety data sheets available at every single campus. We will send it out for anyone that asks, but if a parent asks, we've got the information. It's a dwell time that we can live with and not have too little or too much contact time on the desks and on the different areas. So that's for what's in the spray bottle, okay? Then we have a different product, and I'm ill-prepared in giving you the name, but it is a chlorine-based, and it's for our electrostatic equipment. That it's a little tank, and it's basically a little chlorine tab, and I can get you the exact information on it, but you put the chlorine tab inside the water tank, and it dissolves, and then you spray. So that one is chlorine-based, but that one is going to be not on the desk. I think the desks are probably the one place where the kids have their arms on, they're all over the place. But most of the touch points, it's going to be their hands, and they're going to wash their hands. They're going to sanitize their hands. So, but there's nothing that we're putting in a classroom that is going to be unsafe, that is going to be a trigger for asthma or anything like that. We've had our experiences over the years with graffiti remover. Cleaning company, not in this district, cleaning company went through and did graffiti remover on all the desks. Next thing you know, we had kids with rashes all over their arms. Turns out that, like 409, you have to clean it after you've used it. So we've made sure that all of our products that we're using are safe.
Okay. 2 quick questions. Next one's an easy one. Are we going to have this presentation on our website soon so that our families can see it?
It's already there.
Is it there? Okay. I didn't make sure.
Yeah.
Last one,
That's
PE.
efficiency, speed of Scottsdale,
Yeah,
right?
Told you that was an easy question. PE, I assume it's going to be similar to recess. How are we going to be dealing with PE in K-5?
I think that is a safe assumption, but you know what they say about that word? I can not honestly say that I've even thought about PE or made a recommendation, but I know that my good friend, Dr. Hagigat, and I will talk about that some more and talk to the schools to make sure that we're good to go. The message all along has been no sharing. It applies across the board. So the no sharing component, those basketball stars got to lick their fingers before they make their free throw. We don't want any of that. So we'll chat it up with the PE coaches and make sure that we're good to go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Board Member Kravitz. how are we communicating, or shall I say over-communicating, that parents need to review and update parent views? So if we do need to make an emergency call, we're not getting the aunt in Michigan who can't come and help their child.
So that's gone out in our communication to parents as a reminder in the weekly Friday briefing that goes out. When parents have, it's been multiple ways that we've kind of sent that out. And then I think that there's a reminder when they try to log in as well if they need to complete anything.
Okay, and that weekly reminder has also included a link to this presentation? Or will?
Yes, for Friday when we go out,
Okay.
that can be in there. For
Okay,
sure.
and then we touched upon or discussed athletics and our team, but a lot of our students don't participate in athletics, so has there been any preliminary discussion about how students can meet for their other extracurricular activities when they return to campus in October? I know that we still have some time for that, but I want to make sure that that's not lost.
Yeah, we won't forget that. Right now, the middle school and high school teams are really working on the logistics of coming back, but we also recognize that we want to be able to have processes in place to account for all of those student clubs and groups in addition to athletics so that it can be done in a way that's safe.
Thank you. Board Member Probert.
Yeah. So first off, if we all haven't said it enough, thank you all, your staff, all of SUSD staff that has spent weeks now really trying to comprehend what this is going to look like for our students and make sure, like you said, back in March, you're already thinking and purchasing. So, if we just haven't said it enough, thank you. So my one question is, obviously, PTO moms, you're out of luck. You won't be able to be there on campuses. How are we, as far as some maybe additional classified staffing that might be able to help, maybe even just where needed for those extra tasks that our PTOs are so great at covering on our campuses?
So we're approaching this as all hands on deck. So we're looking at all the staff that we have, how they're currently deployed, how people can be redeployed or used in between assignments. I was talking to one of our other districts today, and they've taken and been able to have bus drivers do things in between their runs in order to meet those needs that kind of may have been filled by other people in the past.
But as far as needing additional staff, are we thinking we won't? Or,
Well, it's really, again, this is, part of our phased-in approach. We learn as we go. Remember, we also will have fewer students on our campuses because we've got 15% of our students in Scottsdale online and some that will still be learning. So we don't have full campuses in the way that we would have before. So there's some balancing there and then an ability to adjust as we need to.
Thank you so much. And Shannon, let us know how that order for good weather goes when you hear it. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I have one, I guess. Do you have any comments?
Not right now, no. Thank you.
I do have one. Went into a little bit more detail, and I recognize more detail because the elementary schools are being phased in first. But regarding lunches for middle school and high school, since they are not in classrooms set up where they can go together, how are middle school and high school lunches going to be handled?
Scoot 6 feet. Farther. Madam President, so we are in the preliminary stages of having those discussions, which could include, again, looking at a reduced day that allow for students to grab and go or eat in an outside area. But again, we're in some very early discussions, and the committee meets tomorrow. But that is one of the biggest concerns for middle school and high school. Even if we have, anywhere from 60%, you're talking about a campus with 2,000, that is a substantial amount of students. So in terms of our decision-making with middle school and high school, our two main priorities is one, to ensure the safety of students and staff, its physical safety, social emotional safety, while continuing to provide rigorous teaching and learning, and to continue that with our EDL model. So that is one of the considerations that we're looking at, making sure we're still maximizing and delivering the minimum number of instructional minutes, but allow for a dismissal time in which students who need to grab and go can do that. And again, we're not putting students into a cafeteria, which is nearly impossible to spread 6 feet apart.
Well, not trying to be one of those middle-aged people that goes back to remember when they were in school. And when I was at Scottsdale High, I don't even remember, I don't think we had a cafeteria. And it was still 102 degrees. And we did sit outside, we found shade somewhere. So I hope that that continues to be an option for students, especially since it's not until October. So hopefully at least the 100, it'll be below 100. But we did do it. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the time spent on trying to figure out every logistical little situation and circumstance. And I know the ones we don't think of, our parent community will contact us and let us know, and we appreciate that, and we will be passing along those questions because we cannot think of everything. So thank you.
You're welcome.
We're ready for Dr. Hagegat?
Yes, we are.
All right, next steps, Dr. Hagegat. Thank you, Mr. Rayler.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good evening, President Beckman, members of the board, Dr. Menzel, and cabinet, along with guests. Today, I have a very brief presentation, which is the slide that you have right in front of you. And first, I want to say thank you to our ICS committee, along with our subcommittees, because without their planning and preparation, we would not be at the stage of implementation. And so all those hours that have gone into this, I just really want to share gratitude towards every single member of the committee and those that have led them. So for our next steps, we have our schools preparing for the K-2 students to attend on September 21st. And part of that preparation is principals and teachers collaborating so that we are able to really work out those numbers so that we can have in-person and EDL quality education. At Scottsdale Unified School District, we always go after a high-quality education for all our students. And we know that the natural hybrid in some cases did not pan out the way we anticipated. And so we have a letter ready to go out for those areas where in those grade levels we have in K2 more than what's expected. In this case, we're using greater than 18 in a kindergarten class. Those families will receive a letter. And in second and first grade, we're doing greater than 20. Those families will receive a letter, and they will have the opportunity to see if they want to join EDL so that we can achieve that natural hybrid. I also want to be very thankful and grateful for our principals, our assistant principals, and our teachers as they collaborate and really bring creative ideas so that we can be able to meet the needs of both the EDL and the in-person. It's not a simple task. I think everyone can only imagine what goes on, but when you're really living it, I've spent numerous hours with many of our principals to be able to just balance, and their professionalism is just amazing, and the way that they have tackled this task really speaks volumes of the quality of human that they are and the love and passion that they have for our students and their families. I know that you received the preliminary numbers, is what I'll call them today. Those were still being cleaned up. So if you did notice some mistakes, it's because we closed the final commitment form on Sunday at 5 o'clock, and actually 5:02, all of them were closed. And then our principals right away started to look at their data, make sure that duplicates were handled, and started to see how they could make a plan work within their school and make sure that they had the staffing that they need to be able to make it work. Our biggest challenge right now has been our EDL, because there are some small numbers, and so we're still working all of these details out. So as you ask your questions, please keep that in mind because we don't have all the details yet. We're still in progress here, and we are confident that we can open on Monday, the 21st, but it's not going to be without a great amount of work put behind it, hours, and some jumping jacks to relieve some of the frustration that some of these things may bring. So I open up for questions, and some I may need to just come back and share answers at a later time, but those that I'm able to answer, I will certainly do my very best. Thank you.
Vice President Beckman.
Again, I have so many questions because I'm trying to ask you things that I've heard from our community as well as
Sure.
things that I have questions about. So the process, by my count, we have 10 elementary schools that have classes with at least some with 20 or more in them. We're going to be firming up those numbers and sending a letter out to families in those classes, asking them, letting them know that that's the way it's looking, and would they like to stay the course or
Correct.
knowing that go to EDL, correct?
Correct. 100% correct.
How are we getting an indication of the teachers knowing what their class is going to be?
Our principals are working closely with our teachers. I know that they have had several meetings so that they could understand what it could look like in their grade level. I know that some have volunteered to be a part of an EDL experience, continue to provide that type of education. But a lot of it is the autonomy. When we were tasked with this interest, our principals shared that they wanted to have that autonomy to be able to work with their staff so that we could have some of that minimal disruption. And again, I'm stepping in as needed when we know that we don't have those site options and see what we can do to work that out. But teachers, to my understanding, have been involved throughout the process in each site and have really given the thoughts to their principal to see what could work. And I have been very pleased with some of the feedback that I have received because it's teachers that are speaking up and saying we want to overly even extend ourselves to be able to support our families that are both interested in person and EDL.
Okay, so you answered my question to some extent. The indication of the teachers, once they know the numbers that will be in their classroom, how are we firming that up to make sure they're okay if they have a classroom of 20 something?
Well, can I jump in here? I mean, one of the things that and again, working with our building principals and their conversations with their teachers, we ask, are there specific teachers who really want to volunteer to be in enhanced distance learning? And to my understanding, there's not a lot of teachers that are choosing to say, we want to stay in enhanced distance learning. There are some who have said they would like to do both, but there appears to be a significant majority of our teachers that want to return to learn in person. We will share the numbers with them just as we would with anyone else. There's a balancing act here, and there's an upper ceiling based on Dennis's comment about 3 feet per as the minimum number that we're going to have acceptable in the classroom. And that varies by classroom size. So I think the top end of that would be 25 students in a class and still being able to maintain 3 feet. And it makes the classroom a little bit not what you would normally want, but that would be like the top end. And there are some places where classrooms are smaller and 25 would not be able to meet the 3 feet minimum. And so that's kind of where we're drawing the line as part of our planning. And then we are really working with our building principals to allow them to work with their teachers to come up with creative solutions rather than trying to impose something, because our buildings, our programs, there's a lot of things that are different. And we've also allowed them to work across buildings within their learning community to see if there are some solutions there. We're also open to working with Scottsdale Online and figuring out, are there some ways to look at the staffing structure there, and can we address some of the questions about numbers in the classroom? So we're working on all fronts to be able to address that.
Okay. Thank you for now, yeah. Thanks.
As a follow-up, how will you be communicating it out to the parents once you've made decisions?
What we have used throughout this entire situation is if it's something that requires consistent communication through all the schools. I draft up a letter, and then the principals are able to tailor it to their needs, and so that's likely an approach that we will continue to use. Again, just like we would at the beginning of the year, our principals reach out to their families to let them know, you have Ms. Smith for third grade. Now, there are going to be some teacher changes in some cases, so we need to communicate all that out. But again, I work very closely with my principals to see if certain cases require a unified approach or if certain cases need to be handled by them individually.
So what I'm hearing is because what we've heard is that there will be certain classes, possibly certain grades at specific schools. So it's not a uniform approach. So what I'm hearing, if I'm a parent of second grade at one of our elementary schools, and I do get a phone call from the principal asking, am I interested in EDL or not, I would be receiving some type of smaller uniform, being a class letter or
Yes,
email.
you're getting an email.
I
You would
be
get an
getting
email that's
Okay,
pre-drafted.
And this would all be before Monday, because
This-
I'm expected to show up on Monday. So
This
is that
will be
what I'm hearing?
happening tomorrow. This will
Okay.
go out tomorrow, and it'll be right before noon, I believe is the time.
Well, that's the letter going out, but what is actually
Return.
going to, in return, those decisions that are made will be coming out sometime.
So the assumption is that what parents committed to is what they want. In the cases where the class sizes exceed that threshold, 18 in kindergarten or 20 in first and second, we're providing that notice so that if any of those parents want to, let's say there were 23 in a second grade classroom, if any of those parents don't feel like they want to send their child to a second grade classroom with 23 kids, we're going to give them an opportunity to switch to EDL. We want to just make sure that they're fully informed, can make that decision. We need that information back, so if the letter goes out tomorrow, or when the letter goes out tomorrow, we need it by Thursday so we can finalize the staffing and notify all parents what to expect on Monday.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Board Member Greenberg.
Can you explain what the number 18 and 20 mean in context? I mean, why 18 as opposed to 20 or 12 or?
So typically, kindergarten classes are a little bit smaller than our first, second, or upper elementary classes. And so we picked a lower number, and part of it was arbitrary. Part of it was just kind of looking at how it might play out within a classroom. And I'm not sure if there was a lot more to that metric. We needed to have some, again, we don't know what people had in their mind in terms of what the number would be in a classroom that met, because each person defines hybrid in their own way. If it's 50% of a class, if there are 30 kids in class, that's 15. If there were 18 kids in a class, that would be 9, but we can't offer a class with 9 because we can't afford to staff at that level. So it's kind of the balancing act. So it was a tip of the cap to kindergarten classes are typically a little bit smaller as the teacher-student ratio. The first and second grade a little bit larger, but that number isn't to say that that's what the number will be. It's that we thought that was a proper point to notify parents. In this classroom, it will be, at least as of right now, it's that number of students or more. We'll give them the number of students that are in the class.
Okay. It's a little confusing, only from the standpoint that 18, I mean, that could be a full kindergarten class at some schools. I mean, 18, we could have 17, and that could be a full class depending on class sizes. I mean, Echo Canyon, as we know, is a school where the classrooms themselves are smaller. It's not, I guess in general, I don't have a significant issue with that. I have to say this isn't entirely unexpected, because it is what I pointed out at the last meeting. So it's not super unexpected, but I did very quickly, Cheyenne, the data was a little bit corrupted, so I some schools, Navajo and Cheyenne, I did not get the data for, but about 27% of our classes have 20 or more students, not including those two schools, because I don't know what they have. And 60% have 15 or more. So, and then some of our schools, as I asked last time, does have very small EDL numbers. Not all of them, because there are sites where, 80% of classes have fewer than 15 kids. So it's not, it just depends by site. But it is a little concerning that some of these are very full. And I don't know, I know that 15% of our students are on SOL, but that doesn't mean that they all come, that doesn't mean that 15% is evenly distributed too. I mean, I would venture to guess, since Cheyenne's numbers or Cochise's numbers are so high, Hopi's as well, this, again, as Dennis Rayler said, I don't want to make an assumption, but my feeling was, if I recall, that, the majority of SOL students do not come from some of those sites. So they would, we are probably talking about the majority of those students coming back. It's 60, at Hopi, it's 60%, 20 or more. Cochise, 60%. So, it'll just be interesting to see how this plays out. I'm willing to give it. It's just I don't want it to be unexpected, only because this was what the data suggested originally. So I don't want anyone to pretend like that wasn't put out there.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So I would, if I can respond, there are a couple of things. One, to my knowledge, we're the only district in the Valley that's offering parents 3 choices, not 2. And that's part of what complicates our current strategy, because we offered Scottsdale online, then we offered EDL full return, but then we found out that Scottsdale online wasn't an option for some of our specialty programs, and so we said that we would find a way to be able to continue EDL when we did our returns. So that creates part of our own challenge. And I'm not saying that it was a wrong decision, I'm just saying that it's unique in the Valley, and part of that is because of the complexity involved in terms of how you make the staffing work. The other thing that was a surprise, so you're absolutely correct that there was a conversation about how the numbers came out and what we might see when we actually got the commitments from families. But the level of loyalty to our teachers by our parents, to me, speaks volumes of the quality of our teachers. I haven't seen this anywhere else in terms of just how passionate parents feel about the teachers that their children have. That's a really strong testament to our school district. It does then complicate things, because parents were weighing, the ones that wanted to stay in enhanced distance learning, the pros and cons between, do I take the moderate risk of coming back in hybrid, which is the CDC classification of where we are, or do I take the minimal risk on EDL but not have the same teacher? And I think that's where we've got difficult decisions being made by a lot of people, and we've got really talented teams of administrators and teachers trying to come up with creative solutions.
And that's absolutely correct. I think, and I always thought, I did say briefly that, people, a lot of our families choose our schools and choose based on the teachers. We have, by far, I think, some of the best teachers in the state, if not nationally, and we're very fortunate to have that type of staff. So it is a testament, and that is a good thing. If nothing, if there's a good silver lining here, that just shows how passionate people are. But I think that not too many people are going to change their mind, therefore, because of that. Understandably so, because it's also very critical for early childhood development to have the same teacher and staff, to have that consistency and not be changing it up too much. So I'm not personally expecting a massive drop-off of some of these classes. So I do maintain my level of concern that Dennis Rayler and the administration have done. You guys have all done a superb job of getting in supplies, getting in procedures, having this checklist of what happens, because we know we get this question all the time, what happens if someone tests positive, what do we do? That's all really good. At the same time, it does mean that these campuses are not just full from a student perspective necessarily, but they're full from a staffing perspective. We will have a lot of adults, and we actually didn't talk about this. I don't know what the rules and regulations will be for staff lounges or those communal areas, because, I think that's probably, at the end of the day, the greatest risk is the staff-to-staff interaction. Mm-hmm. Not that the staff-to-student interaction isn't a very potential risk as well, or student to student, because all of our lives, their safety and health should be our priority. But I don't know with the cohorting model, especially as we move up, whether that will work. And I don't know what happens to the staff at that point if we then have all this mixture and mingling going on. If we start to break down the true purpose of a hybrid model, which, yes, we are in the moderate risk category. I fully agree with that from the CDC's perspective. But obviously, we just want everyone to be safe and healthy. So it's still a concern of mine. I'm hopeful that we will resolve this, and I'm glad that our teachers feel safe and feel like they're working in a safe environment, the ones that do wish to return and don't want to stay virtual. But that is a concern. And it's also, I'm also concerned about the quality of EDL, which you pointed out. That's got to stay a priority too. In a sense, it's kind of unfortunate because the EDL families who are worried about their health to the extent that they don't want to come in now are now the ones who are suffering, who will not potentially have teachers even from their own from their own site, just because of how the pooling happens. So, that, I guess I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if people now called in asking to switch. It's difficult.
It is.
You don't know until somebody has to make a decision and commit. And a lot of families don't know what they'll do until they have to make that decision and commit.
Well, they've committed. This decision, this data that we have now is their commitment. We're just going to ask if they're still okay with the commitment if there are
Given
20 or more
what the numbers
people.
are.
Correct.
So, like at Pueblo, that's 80% of your classes is 20 or more people, and 100% is 15 or more. So, some of these sites, it's depending on SOL, it's de facto reopened. That's.
Well, can I follow up? Because I was somewhat surprised when you said the number was arbitrary. I thought the number was going to be, why you chose 18 and 20 was because you've gone out and inspected every single one of your classrooms, set up those desks, and you know exactly how many kids can be in a classroom that are 3 feet apart. Because you can't put another chair in if it's not going to be 3 feet apart, from what I heard today. So I want verification. Did I hear it correctly, or did I just assume incorrectly?
So, and Dennis, if you want to help answer this, what I understood is that almost all of our classrooms could accommodate 25, but I did not believe that parents thought 25 students in the classroom was going to be what they would get when they signed up for the natural hybrid. So that's why we picked 20
Okay.
and not 25.
Okay, so it wasn't
And then-
totally arbitrary.
No, there was.
Every classroom can be guaranteed to, we will not put more students in a classroom if the seats cannot be, at minimum, 3 feet apart. That's what I heard earlier, so I would just want to confirm.
Right.
President Beckham, members of the board, Dr. Menzel. That distancing component is difficult because we've flip-flopped 4 times now. So our guys and gals are out there, first we're going to do 3 feet. Nope, we're going to do 6 feet. Nope, we're going to do 3 feet. So they've been moving furniture back and forth. And so based on the size of the classroom and based on other contents within the classroom, so if they've got 3 bookshelves and they've got their desk and maybe they've got 2 desks and maybe they've got a U-shaped table. So we've got a really good sense of what we can put in there, but we know we're going to get feedback from some teachers that say, hey, I don't have a lot of room to roam to do the teaching. I need 4 desks out of here. And that's something that they're going to be communicating with their principals to say, hey, I can only manage 18 or I can only manage 19. So I think that's still a little bit of a moving target because remember, you guys made the decision last Thursday to forego the distancing. So Friday and Monday is what we've had to rework all of the furniture again.
Can I jump in, though? Because
Yeah, 'cause that's
honestly, we
upsetting.
shouldn't be having to go physically to our classrooms. We did an extensive capacity study last year where we measured every classroom. So I know that with the bookshelves and things like that, but even bookshelves, if a kid is right next to a bookshelf, shouldn't matter because that's not another child. So I'm hoping that we're making use of all of those very detailed measured classrooms when we're looking at the numbers for this.
Well, plus, I was in the understanding we were following that 3-foot rule. So as long as we have every principal should have his spreadsheet and know exactly how many with that teacher, how much room that teacher kind of likes or what their style is, would have already gone through and done that. So, and maybe the principals have. I'm seeing possibly some head shaking. So I think that's just a question we need to follow up on, because I have a feeling the principals probably have done it. I'm hearing a yes. And so.
They have.
Okay.
To know that our principals are all over every single classroom, making sure and communicating what's possible and what's not, and our smaller schools do the same. So they have.
Okay. So we will be able to guarantee our families
Right,
what
the
that
desk
number
in the
will be
classroom.
for that specific classroom and that teacher. Okay, thank you. Vice President Bethany.
So I just want clarity, just so that we're clear. For our classroom, say you have a second grade classroom that has 25 kids in it, and we send that letter out, and if all of those parents come back and say they are fine with it, and that teacher is fine with it, we are not changing that classroom.
That would be the assumption at this point in time, unless there was so say, for example, I'm thinking of one where there were like two classes of 25, one with 22 and one with 16. So 4 sections. If you wanted to balance, you could get everyone with 22 kids, but 6 kids would have to move, 3 from each of the classes of 25. Then the question is, do you have parent volunteers who want to do that? Does the teacher feel strongly about, so those conversations we're leaving to the site to be able to work through with their families and have those conversations. But we're not going to put more desk in than we can justify based on that 3 foot of separation.
Board Member Greenberg.
Yeah, and I apologize. We only got the data today, so I have no idea what I was talking to Dr. Menzel about this. I don't know, for the public's sake, what the comparison is between even a class of 25 to what we would have expected it to be had this been a normal year. So, there might be some loss there, or it might be just a full classroom. And ultimately, I apologize for confusing everyone. The reason why I asked what the number 18 was is I chose 15 as a basis of about 60% of your average classroom. So I was just curious. That's why I was asking 15 of 25, why we chose 18, because I thought that was a little higher. But yeah, I worry. We are meeting the CDC guidelines and we're meeting the AZDHS metrics technically on what the word hybrid means, but I am still concerned about just how many people will be on these campuses now at this point. But thank you. I really appreciate everything you guys have done. We asked you to put together a plan for a hybrid model. You guys have done exactly that. You've worked very hard on that. We've asked for PPE and all this, additional measures. You guys have done that. So I am very thankful. It's not that I'm not thankful. I am just still concerned, but I appreciate it.
Board Member Perlberg.
Thank you. So I just want to attempt to put a real balanced lens out there tonight. I mean, we've all heard, the very passionate arguments on both sides. And the first thing we all have to leave here tonight, and especially those parents, our community members, and our staff and our teachers who have to make some very difficult choices right now, I think we have to share the lens that we get as board members, that there is no choice here that is your cake and eat it too. Whether you are struggling with EDL or you are struggling with in-person, there are sacrifices on both choices. And if you have a student that is doing well in EDL, of course you want to keep your teacher, but we have the reality of students who are not learning and have not been since day one. So we have to balance that. They want their teachers as well. I'm sure they want to keep their teachers who have been in EDL in person now, and they may not get that as well. So I think just as we leave here tonight, and we know parents are going to be pushed, especially to face the reality of what in-person will look like for real. I just hope we can all go at it with patience and understanding and courage and say, I know I'm going to lose something, but I have to prioritize for my family what comes first and respect those who have to make a different choice as well. I just hope we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Going back to the communication, and I don't mean to just continually ask, but I am. On the communication for those parents, what we're hearing is, we don't know what EDL will look like if we decide to choose it and not go in person. And that unknown may be pushing some people to be in person because that becomes a known. When will it be able to be communicated to those parents what that could look like?
So there are,
it might be different for every single classroom.
right, so there are two primary responses. First, our commitment was to have EDL continue with the same expectations that were created starting August 10th. Maybe a different teacher, but that would be the expectation. If you're in a full EDL classroom, that you're going to continue to meet on the kind of schedule that you had before. You may have some different classmates. You're going to, in some cases, have a different teacher, but the structure would be similar. Where it would be different is where we have teachers who have said, I really want to figure out a way to be able to keep my students that are choosing EDL and teach my in-person. And so that would be a different level of communication, because then the EDL choice is not getting you what you had before, it's getting you something that's customized based on that teacher choice. And parents should also know what that is, because if they want what they had before, it's going to be different if they're staying with the same teacher. So it's being clear on both of those cases. But if you pick EDL and it's a dedicated EDL teacher, it's going to be very similar to what you experienced leading into this shift.
Thank you. Board Member Greenberg, is it your hand raised?
One question we received, it's a little early on, but what happens, do we have any idea of what happens come January when the SOL commitment expires and the EDL commitment expires? Technically, the in-person commitment expires, but do we know what that will look like? It's very early, so I'm not saying this. If we don't know, it's totally fine. I was just curious.
Well, that question, Dr. Hage can confirm. We had that today, as we know that has to be on our horizon for the future. And it's a combination of things. It's part of the reason why we're looking at, can we align certain SOL teachers who may have come from a particular building and say, can we ask that SOL teacher, just say Hopi, for example, to take on some of those EDL students from Hopi, so that if we're at a point where we can get more people back on campus in January because we're down and maybe we get to the green level, then we want to minimize disruption. It's not that there'll be no disruption. We want to put solutions in place that minimize it as best we can. And so we're trying to anticipate some of those things. It's an imprecise science, but it is on our radar.
Okay. And we were very clear in our last meeting, and have been very clear about in a number of our meetings, that depending on what we did, you might not have the teacher that you had when you started, that things could change. I think perhaps where the majority of the concern is it's not necessarily a balanced approach of, 50% of kids will keep their teacher and 50% won't, and it's one of those lotteries, if you will. It has very truly become, anyone choosing EDL is at a very high risk of potentially not having the teacher that they were going to. So I think that's really where that level of concern is coming in, and why that push is happening. And I agree with Board Member Allison on that these numbers in theory could go up. They've made their commitment, but you know how those are. Things change. So and again, I appreciate all the work that's being done here. I do. It's difficult because on the one side, we've seen very unfortunate instances with educators here and coaches here in Arizona where no students were involved at all, just on staff working with colleagues. And I really do not want that to happen here. That's health and safety always comes first, and people's lives are the most important thing we have. So I appreciate, again, everything you guys are doing to try and to implement this, and I appreciate your work on this.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Rayler, Dr. Sackett, Dr. Hagigat, for all the work and for the presentation today. We'll be moving on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Vice President Beckman moves. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second.
Board Member Perlberg seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We will be moving on to our action items. And we have action item A, since we don't have anything from our consent. We will approve of the Fast Bridge by Illuminate as the universal screener and diagnostic instrument for SUSD grades K through 3 beginning in September 2020.
So
Which, I forgot to ask this prior, this amendment, should I add it on now or talk about it and then add it on if we make a motion?
Board President Beckham, it should just be noted in your motion.
Motion, okay,
Thank
thank you. All right, so we will be having, I believe, Dr. Guerin come up to explain and present this action item, and then we'll have board discussion.
Thank you, President Beckman, governing board members, cabinet, guests, Dr. Menzel, Ms. Wagoner. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Tim Fountain, our Director of Professional Development. He and his committee have been hard at work all summer, even under the current situation, as they're going to present their recommendation for an early literacy diagnostic screener. You're going to hear from a few teachers today virtually, so I'm very excited for them to share their work. So without further ado, Dr. Fountain.
Welcome, Dr. Fountain.
All right, thank you. It's a pleasure to get to be here and share this information with you. As Dr. Guerin mentioned, we actually began this process in February before we knew really what was coming, so it's been quite a ride for this group. The first thing, and I know we want to be brief, is just to mention the committee members who were part of this process. It was a great representative group, and they did a phenomenal job. Really proud of the work they did. These folks really, they got into the nitty-gritty, and they really put every vendor through the ringer to make sure that this was exactly what we needed for our schools and our district. So super proud of the work they did. A little bit of rationale about where this comes from, or why we're seeking to make this change. There was a change to Arizona statute, it's on there 15701, that came out last year, where ADE changed the requirements to include a screener for dyslexia as part of our universal screener component. If you've had any involvement with elementary schools, you know dyslexia comes up a lot in conversations. I underlined some key pieces there about it being neurological in order, poor spelling abilities, you've heard these things. And that really is a medical diagnosis or a diagnosis that's done by a doctor. So it's typically something that we haven't had conversations about in the school setting. But this shift from ADE brings that into place. So what they've asked for or require now is that we have a screener that screens for what they consider as characteristics consistent with dyslexia. So it sort of is a red flag that the parents, we would then be able to say to parents, hey, this screener tells us that there's some concerns that may be associated with dyslexia, and we would recommend that they seek that doctor's opinion to do that. So what ADE did, Arizona Department of Education, they reached out to all of the players in the universal screener and asked them to begin to build that dyslexia component into it, which pretty much all of them, or the majority of them, have done. In addition to the requirement for the dyslexia screener, SUSD was also in a position where we needed to update our existing screening process because the other big component that ADE requires of us is that our screener is research-based. What we were previously using in the district, we had created in SUSD, and so we needed to make a shift on that front. So we kind of got a chance to do two at the same time, which was really good timing. I want to note, because it may come up in topic, that through the process, or when we were in the middle of the process, ADE did shift that requirement for the dyslexia component to the 21-22 school year. We're still in need of the research-based component, so it still behooves us to do those two pieces together. The great thing is we would be one of the early adopters for that, and we would have the spring semester to learn about the dyslexia component before the requirement fully kicks in for next school year. So that's kind of where we're at with that. This is obviously important in the RTI framework. There's a link in here. If you got a chance to look at it, that's great. I won't spend time on that. But it really plays into that component. In SUSD, that framework begins with our core instruction, which for us is CKLA, Core Knowledge Language Arts, in the majority of our schools, or Spalding in our traditional schools, K-3, which I'm sure you're familiar with. FastBridge screener has a diagnostic component as well built into that screener, so that's quite helpful to us. Basically, and again, if you look at that RTI framework, I starred these pieces, but basically we're looking at three things here. The universal screener that tells us who is struggling and what level or intensity of support they need. The diagnostic component that helps tell us why they're struggling, so we know how deep the gaps are in their understanding. And then obviously a progress monitoring component. And that's a really big piece for us because it allows us to look at the interventions that we're doing within the district and know whether or not they're really working for our students. So that's really huge. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ms. Christine Bono, the principal from Redfield, who's here with us tonight, and she'll talk to you a little bit about the process.
Good evening. So we started this process, as Dr. Guerin mentioned, in late March. So we had nothing else going on. And we thought this was a perfect opportunity to do some heavy lifting, and it was a really neat experience. We had a lot of teachers, primarily kindergarten. That was where we thought we were going to be doing the focus of this work, and they did not hold back. We had robust conversations through Dr. Leadership's Fountain. It's been a long day. Dr. Fountain's leadership, we were really able to really hone in and focus on what is our goal in this whole process. And he created a great evaluation tool, kind of following that same adoption process we go through. And we were able to use a rubric and really focus our conversations on what's best for our kids. We knew it wasn't going to be a one-size-fits-all, and we were prepared to perhaps have a different tool for a screener than a diagnostic. And we had experts with these teachers around the table who know their stuff. So it was like some pretty robust conversations, and it was a great process. So like I said, we were able to whittle it down through this process and really hone in with how can we picture this being used. So I'm really excited for that fast bridge, and again, grateful for the other principals and teachers on the committee, as well as Dr. Fountain's kind of command of this whole process. I'm going to turn it over now to Michaela Leopold. I think we have her virtually, and she's one of our teachers on the committee, and she's going to talk about the impact that we actually will see with FastBridge in the classroom.
Thank you, Christine. I represent the teachers that worked on the committee, and we are excited about FastBridge. The screener is an all-in-one solution that will allow teachers to spend less time testing and more time teaching. FastBridge provides the necessary tools to quickly gather meaningful, enriched data. And in a busy classroom, every minute counts. This research-based tool will promote district-wide success by guiding educators in best practices for assessment, instruction, targeted support, and progress monitoring. I'd like to share some highlights of the program that committee members were thrilled with. This screener is quick and reliable. We can get data within minutes. The screener has options for one-on-one assessment, both in person and virtually. The screener can be used multiple times a year. It assesses phonics and phonological awareness. It interfaces with our current School City platform, and it has the newly approved ADA dyslexia screener. As classroom teachers, it is really important to identify students at risk, on level, and students that need enrichment. With this type of data, we can guide our instruction and target individual needs and strengths. An adoption of this screener would allow teachers to spend less time testing and more time focusing on data-driven instruction. I would like to introduce Brenda Nelson, who will discuss the impacts on special education.
Hi. From a special education perspective, the norm reference data addressed in FastBridge adds a significant layer to the data general education teachers collect. Normative data compares students within the classroom, the school, the district, and most importantly, in comparison to same grade students nationally, allowing us to see where a student's performing as compared to peers. This is critical as we look to assess whether students qualify as having a disability. This data supports and enhances our intervention planning team, parents and teachers are concerned when their student is identified as at risk for academic failure, FastBridge can alleviate some of that stress by recommending research-based interventions and progress monitoring. We all know that the earlier we can provide intervention, the greater the impact we have. A key FastBridge component is the growth report, which create a projection line to predict whether the student will meet the goals set. 3 data points below the projection line indicates that a different intervention may be necessary. This provides immediate feedback about student progress to parents, teachers, and the students. Over time, this data informs the IPT whether a student is responding to interventions or not, and helps identify the students who may need further special education assessment. FastBridge streamlines the entire process. At least once a month, a parent will contact me concerned that their child is dyslexic. The subtests within this program provide indicators to answer those questions. This program supports even our highest performing students through its growth reports, which measure how much growth is made and if students are making their best growth. A high achieving or gifted student may test at expected level. However, between screening times may not be showing growth measured with their ability. We can use the data to challenge all students to perform their best. This program ultimately supports all K-3 students to achieve by assisting teachers in tracking meaningful data and targeting instruction. The review team recognized that a key factor to this success is professional development. Diane Murphy, the SUSD ELA curriculum specialist, is here to discuss next steps.
Thank you, Brenda. I'll be sharing the implementation steps for the universal screener. After approval from the board, step 1 is for the teachers to complete self-training using online modules developed by FastBridge called FastFlix at the end of October. November, there will be 2 Train the Trainer trainings, part 1 and then part 2 provided by FastBridge. Teacher per site will attend as well as special education and a district support. After the completion of the Train the Trainer sessions in November, training sites for all K-3 teachers will begin at the end of November and early December. There will be an optional immediate pilot of the screener for grades K-3 at select sites. The committee has recommended to begin the implementation focus with grades 2 and 3. During spring of 2021, there will be a phased implementation of the screener tool for grades K-3, and full implementation of grades K-3 of the new screener will be in August 2021. Dr. Fountain will now present cost request for approval.
All right, the final piece here, of course, is the cost of the program, and I know we had some questions specifically about that. So we were able to negotiate a bit of a discount in the first year. The $7.13 that you see for year 3 and beyond, that is the standard cost right now for this program. But we were able to negotiate a cheaper rate for the first and second year. So you can see the numbers represented there. This is a year-to-year program, so it is something that we can look at on a year-to-year basis. We would just need to decide if this program is not meeting our needs, what would take its place that would still meet that dyslexia component, as well as being research-based. So if a year or 2 or 3 from now, we feel like this one is not meeting our needs, we would go through that process to replace it with something in that regard. And this would be part of our overall SUSD curriculum budget. So our request is that you consider this proposal tonight, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have. I know we have the vendor, I think, on the line too, if we have any vendor questions.
All right, Vice President Bickman.
Thank you. This training, is this an annual schedule or is this the first year?
That's the first year rollout. There is an annual professional development piece. A lot of it, FastBridge is built in. You see the mention of those FastFlix pieces. So some of it is similar to what we use in the district for some of our training called Moodles. Some of it is like Moodles, so there's some self-guided trainings they can do, and then there's an annual refresh that we would do. Because obviously we're going to have new folks coming in that will need the training.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Is there's an expectation then that
Yep.
the people that have learned it before are going to be working with the people that are learning it later on?
Right, so we have the trainer model in place, but we would look at a yearly refresh for new
And
folks.
then regarding the cost, so there's going to be no residual cost? You say it's year to year. So if at the end of year 2, we decide this is not a good fit and we're looking at other things, the cost just end there? Or is there going to be some kind of?
Correct, the cost would end there. So we have to notify them by May of that year that we're not going to continue the following year. What you see for the multi-year is just the price guarantee, so they've given us a price guarantee for a number of years. But if by May of a given school year, we let them know that we are not interested in continuing the program, then we would be done with it and we'd be looking for a
So
replacement.
even though you've negotiated this big discount in year one, if we decide at the end of year one, we're done, we only pay this year one fee.
Correct. I don't want to speak on behalf of the vendor. I would assume they're confident that we're going to like their product and that we'll want to continue using it, but.
One would hope, yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Board Member Kravitz?
How does the district currently screen for dyslexia?
We don't currently screen for dyslexia.
Not at all, okay.
At all, no.
Okay.
It's a new piece.
Do we know how many students we have with dyslexia? Approximately. I know, I don't mean to
know
put
a
you on,
number.
I'm just curious, I was just curious.
I mean, and the truth is that, again, that's typically considered a medical diagnosis.
Right, that's why this is interesting to me. I mean, we may, find a lot of students and be
Yeah, so
able
the
to
hard part
help
about that
them.
is that we don't always know students who are diagnosed. I mean, we're making an assumption that a family would get a diagnosis and come back to us and say, hey, we want services, but they may choose not to.
Sometimes that doesn't happen, so I'm glad to see that we have this tool that we can help identify students, so thank you.
So we don't have any sort of recommendation or screening in place for special education with like 504 plans or whatnot for dyslexia?
Not currently, no.
There's new legislation put in place. Skip this.
Sure.
That might, if I may. When we have a student, typically a parent will call and say, my child has dyslexia. And that kind of triggers our IPT or that intervention planning team. And we kind of review with them that any type of reading disability is covered under, if qualified through the evaluation, covered under an IEP. So it triggers that process. We explain that our process does not diagnose dyslexia. They might get diagnosed through that evaluation with a reading fluency, reading comprehension disability, and then that's kind of encapsulated through those services that would be covered under IDA or the IEP itself. But typically parents will call and say, I think my child has dyslexia. Now that just is good data for us to say the parents are concerned that there's something wrong with reading. It may not even be dyslexia. They're just using that word, and as you know, every few years we get a new word that we hear probably more than others, and then we walk them through that process. But the reason I do appreciate when parents bring that to our concern as a principal, it triggers that IPT process. We get the team around the table that includes the administrator, the teachers, the parents, special ed teacher, where we can really now collect some really good data. And if nothing else, we turn that data into really good information to make some good decisions in the classroom. This will just help us do that exponentially quicker, if that helps answer your question a little bit.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I did have some questions, and I asked quite a few of them earlier, so I just kind of want to go over and say that essentially I support the assessment. We've been doing an assessment for quite a while, especially since Move On When Ready for our third grade readers. And we've always been assessing in kindergarten, first, second, and third, correct?
Correct.
So, so I support it. I support the program because I support the process that you went through to pick it. My concerns are, and I just want to make sure that these, that the terms are within the contract that we're approving tonight. And that is, first of all, it was a trigger for me to say when it said pilot means that is a period where we as a district are assessing whether or not we like it. And therefore, it was just mentioned we're going to do this full 7 years without these ability to maybe not, first of all, assess it ourselves as a district. And I had some personal experience with that in this district in which if I ever got on the board, I said, I just can't let that happen again. And that is, we went ahead and approved over $1 million for an intervention software that didn't end up working. And we ended up renewing it for another $500,000 when I couldn't find anybody that loved the program. And I just don't want to see that happening again. So I appreciate you appeasing me on wanting to make sure that after we do the pilot, so it'd probably be next summer, that you would be doing an analysis of the actual program, the Fast Bridge, bringing it back to the board so we can see how did it work? Did it meet our expectations? Is it meeting the needs that we thought it would meet? And then whether board needs to actually do that renewal or not, that you would just bring it back so that we make that kind of a best practice, especially when we are spending $250,000 or $1 million on these programs. Want to make sure that they are doing what we need them to do.
Absolutely.
Secondly, there were a couple things, and I can talk legally about, some of the research that's being done that was mentioned in the agreement. So I just want to make sure that that's kind of the typical that we have, that when we purchase these assessments, that the parents know about that there's a research component to them, and that data would be unidentified but could be using for research. And I don't know how that's communicated out or if it is. And then that segues into the communication piece. How, and this has nothing to do with the contract, it's that additional, how do we communicate with our parents regarding this assessment? As a parent in the district, sometimes assessments would be taken, and as a parent, I would never find out about it until I heard from another parent that it was even happening. And then I would ask about it, and it was never gone into detail at conferences. I didn't know what was happening. So I just want to make sure that, because we take this Move On When Ready reading seriously, that we start in kindergarten educating our parents, and one way to do that is possibly setting up some protocols so that this is one of the items that we talk about at our student-parent conferences, that we are doing this assessment, how we're doing it, you know the protocol. But that, because a child might, as you know, be fine in kindergarten, but all of a sudden in first grade, we're starting to notice that they're not capturing how to read. So I didn't see that component in here, and so I'd like to just make sure that that's kind of written protocol. That would be wonderful. And I think those were the three things. So, thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Yes.
Well,
Board
you
Member
did ask
Kravitz.
the question, how will a parent learn that the student's being assessed? So is that, if I heard you
I had
correctly?
asked that question, in that they're going to be coming up with how that will be.
Oh,
handled.
okay.
Yeah, I think we would develop a system for that. I mean, one of the key pieces, obviously, is that it does relate directly to the MOWR statute. And for that piece, there is already an established protocol specifically for third grade.
Okay.
So there are 2 letters that go out every year. The first one is the general generic letter that every family gets that says, hey, we have this MOWR piece.
Oh,
And if your
okay.
kid doesn't pass the score, throw my mask around. Then we would potentially retain them. But there's a second letter that administrators have, and that letter is triggered by this actual data. So that second letter would go home to any student, now this is specifically third grade, but any student who's in third grade, who when we screen them, we go, there's a concern here. That letter then goes home and says, when we screened your child, we told you this thing was coming for Move On When Reading, and now we screened them and we see some concerns. So we're kind of putting you on alert that we're going to put these interventions in place. And if those interventions aren't successful, we would sit at the table and talk about whether or not retention was in their best interest. So
Thank you.
That already exists, but I know there's some other methods they use as well.
Yeah, and I think if I may, because we implemented quarter progress reports on a really systematic manner last year, this is a great piece of information that'll be part of that.
Okay.
So not only every mid-quarter, but because it aligns with our school city software, it's not like other interventions we may have used historically in our district that may have been a little, for lack of a better word, clunky, where we couldn't pull that dynamic data. This will be right with school cities. So when we pull up their quarterly benchmarks, or we pull up their historic state testing, this data will be right on there as well. So it'll
It's
be
a great talking point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just to keep that, it's not like a conversation we have once and then we never discuss this again. It'll be that ongoing, so pervasive that parents will just know what it is, and then we're able to target it when we have to have some of those courageous conversations about next steps.
Thank you. Any other questions? Then I will, because I'm going to add on a little, I'm going to call it a little writer, but it's not, but I add on to the initial action item. So I move to approve FastBridge by Illuminate as the universal screener and diagnostic instrument for SUSD grades K through 3 beginning September 20, pending contract terms acceptable to the district. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Kravitz seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Dr. Guerin, Dr. Fountain, and Principal Bonell for all your work on this, and all the committee members and I believe it was 3 teachers who spoke tonight virtually. Thank you very much for your input and your feedback in selecting this assessment. We'll move on to future items for consideration. Board members may propose topics for future agenda items. Board Member Greenberg.
I'm pretty sure this will definitely be on a future one, but just as we move forward with this and get more data with classrooms, number of students attending, that we have this on the agenda and we know what middle and high school will look like. Just as an example, I brought up Pueblo tonight at 180%, having 20 or more. In the parent survey data, that was below 50% across the grade levels for wanting in-person return. So these numbers can shift a lot as we move to high school, and I just want to make sure that that's on the agenda. And the second thing is a member of the public, Zach Lindsay, brought to my attention that we do not cover short-term disability benefits for our staff. And I would like us to look into that and maybe have that on agenda as something we might want to consider covering in the future, as that is a standard item that a lot of organizations provide. So if I could just get more clarity on that and potentially put that on for discussion, especially in light of a pandemic and all sorts of stuff. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Board Member Kravitz.
A discussion about schools, bus schedules and school start time. I've been asking for this for a while. And also, I know we have a lot of other things on the plate, but when will we see an implementation of some sort of exit interview for families and staff that choose other options than Scottsdale Unified School
That
District?
survey is going out to the list that we lost this year by Friday, is my recollection.
Oh, great.
So we're using the same template that was created last year that was discussed by the board.
Mm-hmm.
And so the survey's going out this week.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Can you clarify? You mean it's this exit interview survey is going out to who?
Well, the students who were with us last year who disenrolled from the district, it's going out to all of those families.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. And I think one of I'll add on to that is we also wanted exit interviews from many of our employees who have left.
Yes.
So if you could clarify if that's part of that initiative that they had started last year.
Do we do entrance interviews?
That one has not been brought up.
Okay.
If you'd like to add.
Yeah, I'll add that on there.
Any other? Okay. I do have one, let's see, I had a couple. One of the things that I'm requesting is, before Jeff Gadd left, I had asked him to do a sort of cost savings on the district, and I'm wondering if we can get an update, since June 30th has now passed, an update to his work that he had done, as well as maybe first quarter ending September 30, 2020. Obviously, that's going to be after September 30, but that we're looking at that so that we can start to project what we're expecting on the cost savings. And also, I had mentioned, I'd like to see an information discussion item on attendance and participation in our virtual platform this semester compared to fourth quarter, if we find that it would be appropriate and relevant. And I'd like to thank Dr. Guerin, because she has agreed to provide the data and the discussion on the achievement gap assessment that was recently taken that highlights the academic and standard gaps and prospective internal interventions, and I believe that's going to be coming on September 29th, so I'd like to thank you. I think that was the only ones. All right. Anybody else? Yes, Vice President Beckman.
I was going to wait, but since we're all getting them out tonight, I sit on a committee for anti-vaping, and I would like to have on agenda at some point the discussion of an anti-vaping resolution for our district.
With that, it'd be interesting if you wouldn't mind preparing a little bit about what you're learning on your committee, because I know that there's been some good news on that front, but it still is one that we have to be very careful of.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any governing board reports? Oops, no, excuse me, I missed a line there. Dates of upcoming meetings. Special session, September 29, 2020, 5 p.m. at the MDA. Please note that this day is a week earlier than usual because of fall break. And then our regular meeting on October 20th, 2020 is kind of a week later because of fall break. So that October meeting, we will be meeting, unless there is a change, at Coronado High School at 5 p.m. Then I'll move on to governing board reports. Do any of the members have a governing board report? Okay. Then I move to adjourn this regular governing board meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Greenberg seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. This regular governing board meeting on September 15, 2020 is adjourned at 7:47 p.m. Thank you very much.